morning and welcome to day 2 of the OECS Education Forum 2021. I am Tahira Carter, your host for this important dialogue on the future of education in our region. We're so excited to have you back with us as we continue discussions towards improving education systems in the OECS, as we can collectively seek to address the unprecedented demands of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yesterday, our presenters laid the foundation of the OECS's vision and the collaborative work that has been ongoing behind the scenes to get our member states closer to the harmonization of educational systems. To those of you that may have missed it, a few of the highlights from yesterday. In their opening remarks, the Director General of the OECS, he highlighted the challenge of learning as a whole of society endeavor. The Minister of Education for St. Lucia and current chair of the OECS Council of Ministers for Education, the Honorable Sean Edward, he implored us to move beyond traditional norms of teaching and learning. Dr. Darling Hammond, our feature speaker, she provided strong evidence base for science of learning. And we went on a journey of the development of the Declaration of Education. We spent the rest of the morning paying attention to the first 2 themes of the Declaration, with in-depth discussions and contributions from our audience. And we had a beautiful musical interlude from Mr. Eastman Levance, which those of you who were here yesterday would have definitely remembered. We're so pleased by your participation yesterday, and we look forward to hearing from you even more as the discussions get underway today. On our program for day 2, the feature address will be delivered by Marika Batiste, a recent secondary school graduate from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The address will be immediately followed by a conversation with Marika, where you'll have an opportunity to engage her and ask questions. The agenda also features interactive group sessions with teachers and youth panelists and presentations on partner engagement and the way forward. Today's presentations will also be available in French, so our brothers and sisters in the French islands, you can access these live translations by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Please share your questions in the Q&A tab, also found at the bottom of your screen. We want to hear from you. Type to us in the chat, let us know where you're tuning in from, drop your flags, and any other comments that you would like to share with us. Now, before I welcome our feature speaker for today, I would just like to take a moment to recognize the extraordinary resilience of St. Vincent and the Grenadines this past year. In addition to the crippling effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, St. Vincent and the Grenadines endured several volcanic eruptions and subsequent flooding that displaced thousands, forcing some into shelters and others into neighboring islands. The OECS Commission remains deeply committed to supporting the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines as the country continues efforts to recover from the volcanic eruptions and navigate the innumerable challenges resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we celebrate the resilience of this member state, with representatives featuring prominently in the program. Now, without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our feature speaker for today, Ms. Marika Batiste of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. To introduce her, we listen to 2 of her peers from her sister isle, St. Lucia, Yannick Octave and Janoa Sun from the Castries Comprehensive School.
Wow, today is indeed a historical one. Today, I am bursting with joy, as not only have we been invited to sit at the table, but to partake in the meal.
Immense gratitude to the OECS for recognizing the value of giving students a voice at this education forum, for presenting us with the opportunity to contribute to the transformation of education in the region. I could hardly contain my excitement.
I feel extremely proud and elated to have been bestowed the honor of introducing our featured speaker, a first-year student at the St. Vincent Community College. She is an accomplished national public speaking champion and a 2-time anchor for the OECS Yes I News.
Not only that, she's a student athlete. She has won several division titles, and she is also a 2-time victrix laureate at her alma mater, the St. Vincent Girls High School. She was also a member of the National Under-16 netball team and is currently a member of the National Netball Training Squad.
Ms. Baptiste is a well-rounded individual. She functions as the secretary of the Shawnee Methodist Youth Group and is one of 2 youth preachers. She dreams of becoming a forensic scientist or physiotherapist.
Miss Baptiste believes, like the late Eleanor Roosevelt, that no one could make you feel inferior without your consent. It is with great honor and distinction
that we present to you
Miss Marika Baptiste.
Must do the thing you think you cannot do. These words by the late Eleanor Roosevelt serve as my mantra for today. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying what an honor it is to be your junior feature speaker. You've heard a lot of flattering things about Marika Baptiste, and while I am grateful for all I have accomplished thus far, I am ever mindful that I am still a work in progress. Hailing from Fancy, which sits on the northernmost tip of the island, I am a descendant of the Garifunas, who, led by His Excellency Paramount Chief Joseph Chatelet, were forced to retreat to the most inhospitable areas of the island after their defeat in the 18th century Carib Wars. Today, we his people are referred to as being behind God's back, are plagued by the scourge of economic disadvantages, geographical constraints, which include living on the flanks of an active volcano, and cultural and social stereotypes, which meant that my life, through no fault of my own, began on the back foot, to use a cricketing term. An academically gifted child, or so I was told, my grandmother instilled in me that a top-notch education was my passport to success, and thereby rising above my circumstance. As is in close-knit communities, her expectations of me were shared by the wider community, and their unwavering support set ablaze my desire to excel. There was unbridled joy when in 2016 I was a top performer in the CPEA exam. This achievement meant that my lifelong dream of attending the prestigious St. Vincent Girls High School had become a reality. However, sometimes achieving our dream comes with great sacrifice and a price you never anticipated paying. You see, for me to attend the school of my dreams, I had to relocate, as commuting to and from was simply an option that did not exist. So at age 11, I boarded the bus to Kingstown, leaving behind a distraught grandmother, the comforts of my home, and heading towards an uncertain future. My first year at the girls' high school was as exciting as it was terrifying. On one hand, I was thrilled to be walking the hallowed halls and looking forward to the endless possibilities that I had heard were mine for the taking. But on the other hand, I was terribly alone, as I was the only child from Fancy attending that year. The social slurs of country bookie and dryhead were like missiles thrown in my direction, and I struggled to find my footing. My athletic ability on the track and court brought me not only solace, but respect, and dare I say, acceptance. There's a saying that heavy is the head that wears the crown. And when I was crowned junior champion in the February of 2017, I was reminded that my troubles were far from over, as my newfound attention brought with it heightened attacks, manifested in the form of torn books, name calling, and silent treatment, dished out by classmates that were bent on keeping me in my place. Thankfully, this was observed by my form teacher, who brought it to the attention of the headmistress, and this led to a prolonged period of counseling. In my second year, my world as I knew it was thrown into a tailspin by my parents' separation. I found myself in an emotional tug of war which inevitably caused my schoolwork to suffer. By the end of the year, I had not only fallen out of the top stream, but was also living in a new home where conditions were far from ideal. This further compounded my emotional state. My dream of being a student at the girls' high school had become a nightmare, and I longed to be transferred to a school closer to home. Just when I was at breaking point, I was placed on my school's mentorship program, where I found my present guardian, and with her, the haven and stability that I needed to maximize my potential. During my fourth form year, the COVID-19 pandemic changed the face of education. Our classrooms were swapped for online portals, and the devices that our parents saw as menaces became our educational lifelines. I never really got accustomed to this new method of learning, and as a fourth form student preparing to write the CSEC math exam as a part of my school's accelerated program, I found this quite unnerving as I struggled to remain focused. After a term of online schooling, we returned for the start of my final year. My confidence was shattered when I was overlooked for school offices. But this adversity was the catalyst which led to me winning the National Lions Club public speaking competition and the US Black History Month speech competition. These two victories opened countless opportunities, such as being the two-time anchor for the OECS Yes I News, and of course, giving to you this feature address today. A spike in COVID cases caused schools to close once more. And just as we were about to return to the classroom, the La Soufrière volcano, which had been erupting effusively for a couple months, erupted explosively. This spewed unimaginable amounts of ash onto our landscape and turned it into a great wasteland. This was not only difficult because I was worried about my family who had been displaced, but also because I was once again preparing to write CSEC examinations. Thankfully, the government quickly found an alternative, and we went to school at learning hubs and were able to efficiently prepare for our examinations. I like to think that it is in my DNA to turn setbacks into stepping stones, because I am Garifuna, and I am a survivor. When I first saw the theme, OECS education towards a learning crescendo, my initial thoughts were data steps, which represented the levels that one has to climb throughout their educational journey. Each level has its prescribed challenges, so it is incumbent on stakeholders to ensure that the transition through levels is as seamless as possible. My case, as outlined, was fraught with difficulty, and while I was eventually able, with a strong support system, to navigate through the turbulence, the fact is that some students are not as fortunate and slip through the cracks. I do not think that we can afford to leave any child behind, as we all have our unique contributions to make. The onus is therefore on the educational authorities to create equity in education by ensuring that all students have access to similar resources, inclusive of labs and trained staff. This will limit the number of students who have to leave home at such a vulnerable age for what is perceived as a better education. I believe that closer attention should be paid to the mental state of students, as a lot of them suffer in silence. A Big Sister Little Sister program would have benefited me tremendously, as during school I felt really isolated, and I know that it would have benefited others also. I believe that a program like that and others, such as mentorship programs, will help to alleviate some of the isolation that we as students feel, and that they will ultimately help us to find our confidence and our voice. In closing, I'd like to encourage students to believe in themselves and to not only dream, but to have the courage to pursue those dreams, as faith without works is dead. Nothing will ever be achieved if you simply wait for it to be handed to you. You have to go out and take it. It is also vital to know the importance of asking for help. You cannot do everything on your own, although at times it is tempting to do so. I urge you, as I often urge myself, to remember that the heights attained and kept by great men were not achieved through sudden flight, but by toiling to upwards in the night while their companions slept, to quote Henry Wadsworth. I leave with you with this piece of advice. When life brings you circumstances that seem to rock you to your core, and it feels like you have nothing left to give, in that moment, you have to decide not just to live, but to survive. And not just to survive, but to thrive, to rise, to shine. You have to let the world know that this is your time and that you will not be denied. There are some aspects of life that you cannot change as they are given, but what you can control is your story that is yet to be written. Let us do the things we think we cannot do. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Marika Batiste. I'm sure that you have questions for this remarkable young lady, and you'll have a chance to do just that in a conversation with Marika. We now invite Mr. Asif Colin Dover to join us for this segment. Remember, you can share your questions in the Q&A section. Mr. Dover, the floor is yours.
Thank you much, Ms. Moderator. Good morning, everybody. I am so pleased to be sharing such a stage with Marika Batiste. Hi, Marika, are you all right?
Yeah, I'm good. How about you?
I am quite fine. So listen, Marika, and that's a very, very huge, confident smile. Wear that every day. Now, you are the star of this morning, and before I invite everybody else to really pick your brain and understand exactly where you came from to get to where you are, let's have a chit chat. Is that all right?
Yes, that's fine.
That's quite fine. Thank you. Now, listen. Those two young men who did your biography and introduced you really did a remarkable job.
Yes, they did.
But listen, what I am most focused on is your bio and the remarkable things that you have done. It seems that you've lived 1,000 lives and you have not even lived yet. So they claimed that you took part in public speaking competitions. Walk us through the preparation to get to winning those two major events.
Well, my passion for public speaking stemmed from primary school. We used to have in-school public speaking competitions, and ever since I was in grade 3, I would participate. And I grew to love it, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. But in my 5th form year, I decided to try out for the National Lions Club public speaking competition to be my school's representative. And the preparation was gruesome. Most nights I was frustrated, I was tired, but in the end, it all paid off because I was able to be the 2nd-time winner in a row for my school. And that's a victory that I cherish and that I will always remember.
Wonderful. I just saw a comment from somebody in the chat, and they said, and you would agree, this is the exact comment. Whoa, Marika's story is inspirational. And I'd like to ask my other question. I'd like to take it from there. So when you sat the CPEA way back when, I don't want to make you sound old, but when you sat the CPEA way back when, you claimed that you were the only child from your community to enter the girls' high school. And you also said in your video presentation that it was unnerving. Remind us what it was like for you. Tell us.
Well, I remember growing up, I was constantly told by my grandmother that it's high school or no school, because in my country, the St. Vincent Girls High School is a prestigious school, and I always remember dreaming about that being my secondary school. But when that dream was realized, the the aspects and the stuff that I knew I would have to give up to attend that school, they were very disheartening because I had to leave behind my grandmother, my cousins, the only home that I've ever known. But it was a little easier because I was going to live with people that I knew, but it was still a new experience. And while it was exciting and I was thrilled that I was being awarded this opportunity, it was still quite unnerving.
Really, really, really well thought-provoking. So I'd like to start again from the end of your response. You said it was unnerving, right? However, in your video presentation, you said that the introduction of a lady in your life just turned the light bulb on. You see, I'm seeing that smile, and that is a confident award-winning smile. And I'm sure that everybody watching is saying that. So this lady entered your life. Walk us through again about her entry into your life and what it did to turn things around.
Well, it's quite a funny story because I met her at a meeting I didn't even want to go, actually. I remember when I was placed on the school's mentorship program, I didn't want to go because there's this stigma that is placed with mentorship programs that makes it seem that it's only troubled kids that attend these programs. But I met my current guardian there, and I don't say it enough, but everything that I have achieved is credited to her because she really pushes me. It's quite annoying at times, but she keeps me on my ball. She makes sure that I'm focused and that I'm always looking forward no matter what disappointments come my way, that I never dwell in them. We like to say we have one day to dwell, and every other day from that is to look forward and to continue to push to achieve my goals.
Now listen, I would have had scripted questions to ask you, but you're making the conversation really fluid. So again, I will be asking you a question from what you said because it's quite relevant, Marika.
Okay.
You stated that you were placed in the mentorship program, right?
Yeah.
And at first you were opposed to it, right? Because there was a stigma attached to it. However, in your video presentation, you claim that as a recommendation for students who are going through issues, a big sister, little sister, big brother, little brother program should be instituted.
Yeah.
How relevant, how important is that to changing the mindset of troubled youth, or those who, not only troubled youth, but those who are going through issues that they can't seem to surmount?
I think it's very important because as youths, we often feel that we have no one to turn to, no one to confide in. And with this mentorship program, or even with a big sister, little sister program, you are given someone who is going to be there for you, who isn't a teacher, who isn't a counselor, but somebody who's just going to be there to listen to you, to hear your problems and help to guide you in overcoming them. And I think that is very important, especially coming from where I was coming from with no one who I knew with me. I know that if I had someone in my corner, my footing would have been found a long time ago, and you might have been seeing me here quite earlier than today.
Well, listen, nothing, I want you to understand something. You've given us a lot of nuggets of truth to think on, but really, nothing happens before it's time. And this is your time. Now, listen, you might be able to, not might, let me correct myself. You're able to say, I am Vincentian, I am Caribbean, but now you're able to say, I am OECS, because you were two times anchor for the OECS News the Vincentian leg, right? The second one is quite notable, where you were the anchor that shared the question and answer segment with the Prime Minister. Could you give the audience an insight into that?
It was really exciting and inspiring because we the students got to ask our questions and have them answered by our Prime Minister. But we felt at ease as our Prime Minister has a very welcoming personality. So it was quite natural, but I really felt excited and honored to be given the opportunity to share this engagement between the Prime Minister, and I will always remember it. Let's just say that.
Wonderful. Now I'm going to read some of the comments from the chat for you. They are going to be they're going to be what I'm looking for, ways to make you feel even more important at this time. That's the only way we come, right? So from Henrietta De Silva, Marika, this is but let me read what somebody said first, and then I'll read what Henrietta De Silva said. Dr. De Silva said, somebody agreed that you are a role model for youths. So you have big shoes to fill. Somebody's watching you. Now, Dr. De Silva wants to know, Marika, what primary school did you attend?
I attended the fancy government school because I live in the northernmost area of the island. So there wasn't really a choice of what primary school I could attend. It was the only one in my village, so that's the one where I went.
Okay, so let me ask a question. So where it is said that your beginning sometimes determines where you're going. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't, because I think we all get to choose what our story says. We all get to choose where we go. It's about staying motivated and always planning ahead for your future. And you cannot think that just because you were born into a circumstance, you're going to stay there forever. You have to want better for yourself, and you have to go out and achieve that better.
Okay, I'll tell you something else that Embler Spencer said. Good example of seeing obstacles as stepping stones. Looking forward to hearing great things about you in the future. So again, persons are looking. Okay, now I'd like to get somber just a moment, just for a moment. Now, if we were to really get down into the brass knuckles, right? The theme that permeates your story is achievement through adversities. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now tell us how these adversities, how these obstacles become, and I'm going to use your words, the catalyst that pushed you to where you are now.
Well, I have to credit my support system. I like to say I have an army of supporters, and even when I'm feeling down, they're always there to help me to look forward and to know that I'm not going to always be down. My auntie Heather always tells me not to wait for stuff to be handed to me, but to go out and try and take it. And I went to the perfect school because their motto is per adual ad alta, to through difficulties to the heights. And I like to think that that's what I live by, and that's what I project. So yeah.
Okay, I'd like the audience to know that they can engage Marika. You can raise your hand and you can start engaging Marika, right? You can ask her your question anytime you feel. Okay, so you spoke on two things, Marika, from your biography, from your video presentation. You said that the system can help students who are going through issues and the students themselves. I'd like to ask you a question from what you mentioned about the system, that they can help the students surmount the problems. Now, if you were given an opportunity to sit at the table with the policymakers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, right, to chart a new course for education where it talks about equity and inclusion for all students, what is one thing that you tell them? How would you advise them? How would you influence them so that they take students into consideration when they're making their policies?
Well, I definitely think some change has to go into the allocation of resources because unlike the school that I attended, a lot of schools do not have the same access to labs and they do not have the same amount of trained teachers. So I know that they are at a disadvantages. And while I am aware that there are always going to be top schools, I do not think that there should be such a gap between what they are able to access because these are what help you to get the opportunities that you are able to receive. And I think that it's just too big of a disadvantage. So I would definitely tell them to take a closer look into how resources are allocated and also implement the programs which I stated in my video, like programs that will help students to find their voice and to be comfortable in their new surrounding.
Well said. Now, Joseph, one of the persons in the chat, in the forum this morning, thinks that your story is impressive and thinks that you're going to be a future leader. Right. Now, Celeste Burton, right, thinks that wants to know what career would you be pursuing and why?
Well, for right now, I'm looking at forensic science and physiotherapy. Physiotherapy mainly because I love sports. Ever since I was a child, I've been obsessed with all sporting activities. Doesn't matter what it is. So I think I want to venture into this profession because it will be helping persons who have gained injuries and stuff from doing what they love to recover and hopefully get back out there to doing what they love once more. And also forensic science because me and science have a love-hate relationship, but I've always been interested in forensic science because it helps to tell a story of crime scenes and things that happen. And I just think it's so fascinating being able to connect dots from so little information. And it's always been an inspiration to me and something that I admired.
Again, well said. Now, from somebody in the chat, Michael Seaman, he thinks that the education policy makers in the Caribbean, in the OECS, should have a way where you have a digital library for students to access important material. Do you share his outlook that we should be connected in terms of academia via a digital library?
Well, I know there are a lot of students who cannot afford to acquire all the necessary textbooks for school. So I think a platform like this will help to bring them up to par with other students who can afford these things. And also it will be useful to be able to share information between different schools because although at the end of the day we get taught the similar things, it would be nice to share the knowledge so that we can all carry ourselves to the next level, I think.
Okay, now listen, with the few minutes remaining, all right?
Okay.
Now, we have talked about glorious things about you, and it's all the positives that we're hearing, and there goes a smile again. But listen, to a student viewing this, right? They may not have the things that you have currently that help you surmount. So they may not have a guardian that really has stepped in and changed things for them. Mm-hmm. You are a human being and you still get inundated with issues, academics, personal, right? In terms of academics, and you're going through those issues that seem to want to sideline you. Talk to us. Talk to the student at your level out there. How do you get through? How do you get over?
Well, first of all, I like them to remember to have faith in God because His grace is what helps me to achieve all of that I have achieved, and also to ask for help. I cannot stress this enough. It's so important to know that you can ask for help. It's not expected that you do everything by yourself. Ask for help when you need it and also believe in yourself. I know self-esteem sometimes sounds like such a small thing, but it's really big and it really helps to push you forward, because if you don't believe in yourself, no one is ever going to. So you have to believe in yourself first. I think that's the first step to achieving all that you want to achieve.
Okay, now, yes, I think that self-belief is the beginning of achievement, right? You've got to believe in yourself. Okay, now Selma is asking, what is one thing that you want to change about the education system?
Well, for me, it's kind of what I've said before, because I know if there were equal resources, I wouldn't have had to move from my home at such a vulnerable age. So I think that this should really be looked on and provided so that students can stay in the comfort of their home, because that's where you bloom best, I believe. And I think that also that they should really pay attention to the mental state of students, because a lot of us are overwhelmed, and a lot of us, because we don't have anybody to talk to, we often slip through the cracks and drop out of school, and nothing is ever really, no attention is ever really paid to us after. So I think that if they take a closer look to these as areas, that a lot of students will be doing better and the country will be doing better on a whole.
Okay, very well. Now listen, a while ago, I told you, you are Vincentian, you're Caribbean, you are OECS. Now, the OECS is trying to chart a new course, trying to ensure that there is equity in education, that young persons are provided for, right? With this drive, this trust that the OECS is developing, trying to make sure that every child is able to achieve and there's equity for everybody, right? If you want to speak to the policymakers in a positive light, the OECS policymakers who are trying to chart this new course to make sure young people like you and others have a voice, have the education that they should get, what would you tell those policymakers? What would you tell those OECS persons?
Sorry for the background noise. I think it's a great idea, and I know a lot of students from my community especially, they end up dropping out of school and going to work because they have no other choice and they cannot further their education. So I think that this new forum, like Education Towards a Learning Crescendo, can help most students to go out there and achieve their dreams. I mean, not everybody is gifted academically, but we all have our unique contributions to make. So it is important that we're all given an opportunity to try and do something to improve our circumstances.
And yes, sometimes it's when you're given that opportunity, you are able to shine. It's only when you're giving that opportunity. Yes, it's only when you're giving that opportunity. So we are in the closing moment, right? We are in the closing moment. So I'm going to give you an opportunity, a sort of way to take, to tell the audience, to give the audience one nugget of truth, one thing that you want to leave with them. And the audience in general will get this, but specifically young persons, what is one thing you want to tell them?
Well, I have to go back to my favorite quote. No, never let anyone make you feel inferior, because no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. A lot of times we're so focused on what the world thinks of us, we never really take the chance to believe in ourselves to see what we can do in life. So I like them to look internally first and go out there and be themselves unapologetically, and they will see what they can achieve.
Okay, now Mariah.
And also, I like to tell them not to aspire to be somebody else, because that spot is already taken. So just believe in yourself, set your goals, work towards them, and you will do great things also.
Okay, so now it's time for me to wrap up. On behalf of the OECS Commission and all of us, Mariah, we'd like to say thank you. You did an excellent presentation, and we are looking forward for good things from you in the future. The OECS stands ready to support you and all of the young people in their drive, in their quest to become excellent. Marika, all the best.
I'd like to say thank you also. It's truly been a pleasure being able to share my story, and I'm hopeful that I inspire others to believe in themselves and go forward to achieve something awesome. Thanks for having me.
To use a religious word, amen. Thank you. Take care, Marika. Nice speaking to you. Back to Ms. Carter.
Such an inspirational session. Thank you so much, Marika and Asif. Marika's story is certainly an embodiment of many of the themes that we discussed yesterday. The importance of the environment, support, and emotional well-being on a child, that they are all key to student success. Truly inspirational story and inspirational young lady. Marika, we're all very proud of you, and we certainly look forward to only great things in the future. Now, an important element of a successful learning crescendo is support from our education partners within the region and internationally. So to speak to this, we now invite Dr. Bjorn Hassler from Open Development Education UK to discuss partner engagement and advancing OECS education. To moderate this session, we invite Dr. Carleen Radix, Head of the Human and Social Division at the OECS Commission. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, everyone. Carleen, will you come in first, or shall I just start?
You can go ahead and start.
Thank you so much. Now, Marika, I have to say this is going to be quite a difficult act to follow. So that was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I will do my best to keep up the energy for this part of the presentation, because the declaration is very exciting in the sense that we try to translate some of that aspiration that we've heard, some of those really great things that are happening across the islands, into a declaration that will help everyone move forward and generate enthusiasm and generate equity. So just formally, let me say, all protocols observed, of course. This is the third presentation on the OECS Declaration on Education. As we heard, I'm Dr. Bjorn Hassler with Open Development and Education, one of the development partners. So now we come on to the part where we will speak about partnerships and collaboration. And we have these three articles that focus on that area: strengthening stakeholder participation and accountability, intersectoral support for the most vulnerable, and expansion of public and private sector relationships. So let me start by talking about Article 7, strengthening stakeholder participation and accountability. What do we mean by that? What comes under that? Well, parental involvement. We have just heard that the home is a great place for learning. And so how do we involve stakeholders in the home? How do we involve parents? So obviously, the school-home community division is a really important factor in promoting learning. We do need to get increased engagement from parent-teacher associations at both the national and the regional levels to maintain these strong bonds between the learners, their homes, the communities, and the schools. So we put forward that ministries of education must actively seek that engagement with relevant associations and relevant members in the community to ensure that those are represented in the discussions around how to support learners in the classroom, in the home, and within the community to reach their potential, to give people the opportunities to shine, as we've just seen. Then what does it mean for student involvement? So 7.2, student involvement, national and regional student councils. So we have to give prominence to learner voice. We have to let learners engage more in charting the path for the future of education, because learners are best placed to inform other stakeholders about their experiences of teaching and learning and the realities of the education system. We do need structured engagement through national and regional student councils and other youth groups. And this must form part of ongoing deliberations about education reforms and the future of education in the OECS. we need to not just assume that those groups are there, but indeed the development and funding and further promotion of such groups is a priority area. Now, 7.3, accountability and leadership. We need leaders from schools, from communities, from homes. So at the heart of stakeholder partnerships is leadership and accountability. Leadership and accountability go hand in hand. Leadership must be participatory, and stakeholders must strive to hold each other accountable to ensure that all those actively engaging in the continued development of an OECS education system. Right? Education systems are human systems. And so transformation and change must begin at the human level by drawing on all of those stakeholders. So strong participatory leadership from all stakeholders and accountability structures, including monitoring and evaluation of initiatives and periodic system performance reviews, are requirements for a future effective OECS education system that is responsive, adaptive, and transformative. Let me move on to the next article, Article 8, intersectoral support for the most vulnerable. We have heard in the presentation just now from Marika that, there are differences. Sometimes it is potluck, where you're born and what that means. And it's not just like that in the Caribbean. It's like that everywhere, even in the UK. I'm based in the UK. I'm in London at the moment. It is the same here. The circumstances where you are born, where you grow up, often determine your future path. So we need to give intersectoral support for the most vulnerable. What does that mean? 8.1, improving social safety nets. We want an education system that aims to cater for all persons. Such a system must take into consideration the impact of social disadvantages on learners and their ability to access and benefit from a quality, effective education. If we just apply education interventions in a very selective way, then those will fail to address the challenges that marginalized learners face and therefore perpetuate inequities. In place of such very narrow practices, we have to establish holistic approaches that really support learners in the ways that they need to be supported. This means we have to work not just within a single ministry, say the Ministry of Education, but we have to go across social services, health, and other facilities, other ministries, other community organizations to really get the optimum support. Now, 8.2, let me talk about learners with special educational needs. We do need to move towards action, and we need to have action plans for enhancing the inclusion of learners with special educational needs. And again, those need to be developed in collaborations with parent-teacher associations, with communities. I think we really need to think about how can those learners be accommodated? What are the best physical and virtual spaces where learning takes place? And how do we address those situations through the learning and curriculum standards? And I might add that with some of the stakeholders that we've spoken to who specialize in this, sadly, they have said that a lot of this is to do with the attitudes. Of course, we always need more funding. There's always scope for improvement. But many of the people we've spoken to have actually said, look, the issue that we have here is one of attitude. We could be doing so much more for learners that have special educational needs, but we're not doing it because the attitude isn't there. So I think there's a significant opportunity. There's a significant requirement, but also an opportunity to transform how we include learners with special educational needs. Now, 8.3, learners in conflict with the law. Learners in conflict with the law also need to have access to education, specifically or including vocational training. The programs must ensure that the learners also have the opportunity to reach accreditation and assessment standards that are also available to other learners. The programs must be tailored in such a way that they contribute to the full development of learners' capabilities and skills, to the tools and values which will help them to reintegrate into their communities socially and, very importantly, also economically. Let me move to the final article in this set, which is to do with the expansion of public and private sector partnerships. 9.1, public-private partnerships. A pillar of strengthening stakeholder participation and engagement must be building public-private partnerships. Engagement with the private sector needs to inform education reforms beyond just discussing funding. Like, we know that around vocational education, technical training, and so forth, those cooperations are so important to make sure that the students that come through the education system will be able to earn a livelihood. Therefore, curriculum and assessment reforms will benefit from public-private partnerships, and the way in which the education system adequately prepares learners for the world of work, and also as leaders in innovation and entrepreneurship. Without understanding what is happening in the private sector, how can I be prepared to be a leader of innovation and entrepreneurship? Finally, 9.2, education programs. These public-private partnerships can foster a more structured and hands-on program for learners that will actually empower them to develop the skills necessary to be successful upon graduation from secondary, tertiary, and adult education. So here are the articles that we talked about. It's my pleasure to hand it back to the forum and to everybody participating, everybody asking questions. So do these articles, in the way I've outlined them, reflect what you think is needed for enhanced partnership and collaboration? So looking forward to hearing from you on those topics. Over to you, Carleen.
Thank you so much, Bjorn. I'm hoping persons can hear me well. And thank you for that exciting review of what we're looking at in terms of this important declaration on education. These three articles, which really fall under the theme of partnership and collaboration, really make sure that we have everyone's voice being heard, and that it's a whole of society approach to ensure that every learner succeeds. So we are very lucky to have some questions in the Q&A. I did see a hand up a bit earlier. And so just to give some direction, we have some time to have some interaction around this topic. And certainly I think it will engage many, because we are all a part of the process of participation for improving learning. So we have a few questions in the question and answer, and I'm asking persons, if you have questions, please click on the Q&A tab at the bottom and insert your questions. We'll try to answer them this morning, but if not, we can see how we get to them. And also we'll have an opportunity for persons to come in and have some conversation. So let's start with some of the questions that are in the chat. We had a very first question from Shirlene Bell George asking or saying, we have a problem in some of our schools where the teachers or systems choose the subjects that students pursue. For example, top students usually go into the science stream, top in quotations, and not so bright students are placed in a technical stream or are not allowed to do certain subjects. How can we effectively develop a program in school which allows students the opportunities to do subjects they're actually interested in? So this is an excellent question, and I know we've had some of our panelists, we've had Dr. Jules give an answer within the panel. But Bjorn, would you like to give your take on this question?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to do that. I might also just say, if you have a take on that question, like, post it in the chat. You know, the chat is often a good medium for us to also have some discussion. So if you have thoughts on this, then please also post it in the chat, and I will then also try, as far as my multitasking allows me, to respond to that as well. But what I think is that, we know that some of the education systems aren't all that well adapted for the future of work. And it's an age-old debate whether you should have a very specific system where you stream children very early, or whether you should have a system that's more general. Now, my own background, although I have some Caribbean family, is primarily a German background, and the German education system is very generalist. And I have to say, I did physics as an undergraduate. I did A-levels in physics and mathematics. I did physics as an undergraduate, and then did a PhD in mathematics. And look now, 20 years later, I'm working in education, nothing to do with mathematics. So I do think that if we can keep the options open, especially where we know that some of the systems aren't that tailored to the world of work, we should keep options open for children. We should let children and young people explore their options and change their mind. And I've certainly changed my mind many times across my own education and my own career path, and I think I've done quite well out of that, and so I think we need to keep those options open.
Thank you for that. And I see persons have taken your advice. We have a few comments in the chat in response. And we have from Marika actually talking her response, noting that it's a great question because she knows of students who've had this very experience, and the belief that from Angel talking about the fact that the school is a place for support. And Joseph is mentioning that we have to have different options available for students, for all students. All students should have the ability for all options. I think going along with your generalist view that students have all options. So I'm going to go to another question. Here is a question: how do we incorporate organizational learning as part of accountability? Specifically looking at article, and the question is maybe in Article 7, because we need to do so consciously and not leave this to chance or be forced into it by disasters. And we are a very disaster-prone region. So, there are those cycles that are often the impetus for change. But how can we be more deliberate, do you think?
Yeah, again, I would invite people from the chat, and indeed the other speakers that are also, have spoken, and others to contribute to this. I do think that, learning schools need to be learning organizations, ministries need to be learning organizations, right? So it's actually, when we look at, some of the leadership frameworks, actually we say that everyone is a learner. So for example, in the Leadership for Learning model, which is one particular model for leadership, we say everyone is a learner. So that doesn't just mean every child or every young person in school is a learner, but it also means teachers are learning, head teachers are learning, regional ministry officials are learning, the Minister of Education is a learner and is learning, so I think, and what that means then is we have to think about, again, to borrow from Leadership for Learning, is it's fine to say everybody should be a learner, that's great, lovely, but how do I make that happen? And so it means creating the conditions for learning. If we want learning to take place, we have to create the conditions for learning, which means creating spaces where teachers can discuss, creating spaces, among ministry officials where we can discuss. Even a space like today is a good space for learning, although there's a lot of people here. So typically learning spaces have just a handful of people, to reflect and change plans, So we're great fans of these ideas around professional development and setting up more structured programs that are extended in time, that aren't just like an event to which you come and then you've learned, in the same way as a child goes to a lesson, might be lectured to, and then it's said that they've learned, but in reality they haven't. So often we say also at the professional development level, there have to be extended programs that monitor the learning, that offer space for discussion, that offer opportunities for experiential learning, and so forth. So I do think that there are structured ways through these kinds of programs that can enable that institutional learning, and it is extremely important.
Wow, thank you for that. I think that we're talking about what's happening in the institutions. The next question really takes us to the environment. From Leandra Laidlow. She's asking, could Article 7.3, and I think she's talking about Article 7 in general, But could the stakeholder involvement include church, youth groups, community groups, etc.? So the greater social fabric, how are we thinking about that or incorporating that in education? And so what are your thoughts on that?
So again, I think I'd invite everyone to say to this. What I would say is that it's a really valuable suggestion, and I want to draw the discussion again to the Google Doc that we have online. And I would love for people to come in. We've had a lot of comments already. I would love to come in for people and suggest those kinds of changes. But I think this is a very sensible step. We need to really look at, what the local environment is like and reflect that better in the declaration.
Yes, I mean, it takes a village, certainly, to raise a child. And we need to be, I think it's important to be deliberate in educating the village as well around what is needed to support a child to be able to succeed. So engaging the different areas, I think it's also important. Obviously, we're centered around the student and the immediate family involvement with regards to immediate education. But this is certainly something to consider. I'm just looking back in the chat and to see what is being said. Yes, I see a comment from Eldine Henry. As stated yesterday, people need to be taught how to learn from a very early age. It's a critical skill which can be transferred across many useful disciplines. I think this is a throwback to your point on being more general in the beginning. Okay, let me go to some more of the questions.
And just to add to Eldine's point, I think it's of course we all agree, that children need to learn how to learn. But the real question is, how do we make that happen? And then we have to look at the constraints and say, okay, is the curriculum constraining this? Are the examination routines constraining this? Are some of the social settings constraining this? So I think that has to be a really clear focus for the way forward to say, yes, this is what we want to achieve, but what are the concrete steps? Where are the constraints in the system? And then be prepared to make some quite radical choices, because we are in a heavily constrained period through COVID and all of this. And we will have to make some hard decisions, whether, let me be blunt about it, whether we say, okay, we need to formally cover the curriculum and all of the examinations, or we teach children how to learn. And some of those hard decisions may need to be made. We can't have everything. When you want something else, there's something you might need to let go of. So yes, I think that's
well said. And going back to a point that you made earlier, we are all learners, and even learning how to learn may be something that we have to learn at different levels to make that shift in the education system. So sometimes it's taken for granted if you've been exposed to it yourself from an early age. But if we are in a system in which that is not the norm, then we have to realize that we also have to shift that learning how to learn at all levels, and then teaching how to learn. So I agree. It'll take hard decisions, but it also takes the support for everyone to sort of make that transition together. We're moving to a question here by Nafisa, and I really apologize if I mispronounce your name. Abdulatif is what I'm seeing. The classification vulnerable can vary from one environment to the next. What will be done to ensure that the vulnerable are indeed identified and adequately catered for? I think this is a good question. What does vulnerable mean? And oftentimes we think about social safety nets. I like to think about social protection and the social protection floor, which really covers the whole population so that you don't have to pick and choose who the most vulnerable persons are. But what's your thought on that, Bjorn?
Yeah, and it's almost an interesting idea to consider this question from Nafisa together with Janetti's question, because I think they're all about the optimal support for each student. And a student might be vulnerable at one particular moment, but they might not be vulnerable at another moment. So I think this is a hard question to answer. How do we really tailor the system so that each student has the optimal support? It is, I think, in many ways, the answer to some of these lies in the social networks that exist around the schools. And this is a problem also globally, but the teacher has to do so much. You know, often the teacher is the only available agent in that setting. And it's very, very difficult then to say, look, we're going to pile more and more onto the teacher. So I think, you know, some Caribbean islands have got a good structure around educational psychologists that can be brought into schools to support, you know, where children are identified. You know, so I think the identification can be done by the teacher, and through professional development, there's certain, you know, ways of assessing children that can be brought in, whether that is with regard to their learning outcomes or their socio-emotional well-being. The question is what happens then. That is not enough. So that's where these other professionals need to come in, such as educational psychologists and so forth, social workers that can help make specific learning plans for that child. And I think it's true also for children that are gifted. And that doesn't necessarily mean advantaged children, but it means children that are still disadvantaged, but have specific gifts. And again, we need to, you know, pick those children up and make sure that, you know, they are optimally supported. But, you know, there's a lot of work there that, you know, will require some restructuring and some rethinking and bringing some of these values really into the core of how the system functions rather than just being aspirational values.
I think that, thanks for that and for the intersection. I think maybe it might be a good time to actually hear some voices, because I know this question by Gianatti George. She actually had her hand raised earlier. So Gianatti, I may be pronouncing your name incorrectly, but if you would like to, I'm inviting you to be able to open your mic and to make your comment to the group. You may need to raise your hand again so that we can find you quickly to be able to open your mic.
Yes, Giannetti, please join us. Giannetti and I have had many discussions in various programs up to this point, and I would love to hear your voice and your question.
Thank you, Dr. Radix, and hello, Beyond. It's good to hear and see you again and the rest of your team. You did address part of my concern, because as I looked at the declaration, I realized there was not a specific, another point in it where we could raise this issue of gifted students and accelerated learners. And I felt that Article 8.2 was perhaps the best place, because if we do not ensure that we have made preparations for gifted learners, accelerated learners, our geniuses, then they would fall by the wayside, or as Dr. Simon stated yesterday, they may become stuck in the middle.
Yes.
And by virtue of all of this, they now become vulnerable. So we have to ensure that consideration is given to those kinds of students. And it's not just a matter of giving them more work at whatever grade level they are, giving them more increased quantity. What's about in terms of increasing capacity and developing, advanced skills, complexity of tasks? That's what we need to focus on. And perhaps if a teacher has students like this in the classroom, they may not be sure what to do. And do we just automatically upgrade them? What should be done? What framework exists? We do not have such a thing. So definitely consideration must be given. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I mean, I really loved hearing your voice, and I can certainly relate to what you're saying in terms of teachers wanting to advance, but sometimes the only thing that they do is pile on more work on a student that they think is capable, without necessarily having the skill set to begin to shift the exposure and the types of thinking for that student. So thank you very much for that. I wanted to there's another hand raised from Cheryl Bishop. I'm just acknowledging it, but I just wanted to mention the two last points that are within the Q&A, and then I'm going to go to you, Cheryl, because we like to hear your voices. One is on the special needs, what kinds of intersectoral support for special education needs learners is the article addressing, and we spoke quite a bit about that. And I wanted to mention in the chat something that I myself have realized, and it's something that we need to do a bit better in terms of when we have forums like this from the OECS. Should we have sign language participation, or should we have the ability, at least when persons are talking, for words to appear on screen? The technology is available for that, to make sure that we're being more inclusive, for example. So some of the things that we need to rethink in terms of when we're doing these forums. There's a question about special education needs, and I'm just going to tie that to a question around the private sector, because there's one question with regards to private sector sponsorship and what is the role of the private sector in all of that. So I'm not tying it to it, actually. There are two different questions beyond, but maybe you can speak to these two, and then I'll go to Cheryl Bishop so we can hear another voice.
Apologies. About the intersectional support, that was the first question, right, from Beverly?
Correct, from Beverly LeBlanc.
Yeah, I think the article is short. You know, all of the text in the declaration is very short, and I think, you know, we don't really have anything at the moment beyond the suggestion of these different stakeholders cooperating. But I would like to invite you to put forward, you know, specific suggestions, and they could be added. It's slightly difficult because the declaration is kept very, very brief. But we can certainly add some footnotes, or we could add some endnotes with concrete suggestions, or a blog post even, you know, with concrete ideas for that implementation. So yes, I think I'm not. Yeah, I think that's my answer to that one.
And the private sector involvement. And let me just ask if we can, if there is a place persons can put comments to the document, can we put that link again in the chat to remind persons where they can access that?
Yes, let's do that, yes.
So yes, your thoughts on the private sector?
So I think if I can answer this slightly more generally, I think for me, this give and take relationship with the private sector is really, really important. It's not just that the private sector might be able to fund schools, or that we can draw on, you know, private sector resources, but it's also about cooperating with the private sector around, especially around this issue of technical vocational education and training, that there's really a two-way engagement between the world of work and, you know, the education system. And I think that's really important. I think I think, you know, the private sector cannot just give funding. Of course, there's, you know, corporate social responsibility and all of those things, and that is useful. But, you know, one of the real issues that we have when we look at TVET, for instance, is the willingness of private companies to take interns or to take apprentices. You know, and so there are so many ways in which we can think creatively about the engagement between the private sector, and it will depend on the circumstances of each territory, what kinds of opportunities there are. You know, I do think there's a lot of opportunities within the given settings to enhance that. Have I answered that reasonably fully?
I think so. I think the concept has been answered. I make note of Michael Seaman, who brought us the lens to think about the private sector. And I'm just going to go, I see Dr. Jules has his hand up and his camera on. Dr. Jules, did you want to make an input? And then I can go to Cheryl Bishop, who has had her hand up. We're not hearing you, Dr. Jules.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. And John, actually just a suggestion coming out of what John just said about the declaration. I think there must be a way that we can make this document a living document that will be open to stakeholders, parents, teachers, students, to do the kind of elaboration we see happening a few minutes ago. So that for a period of time it remains open after the declaration. So we declare the declaration, and we leave it open for inclusion of comments, and then we synthesize it, and then it's closed and officially passed. I think that would be a very creative way of doing this and
Yes.
a very participatory approach. Yeah, thanks. Over to you.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely, I
Thank you
fully
so
agree.
much, Dr. Jules. Absolutely in agreement. And that's just shifting the way that we do things and making sure that we include. Let me ask Cheryl Bishop, if you're on, put your hand up again so we can easily find you to open your mic. Not sure if she's still available, so I'll just give it a little while. Okay, well, while we wait, I'm going to go back to the questions. We have a question about accountability and leadership. How
Are
is
you
this
hearing
really?
me?
I'm hearing you now. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Hello. Yes,
Yes,
I've been listening, and I'm quite impressed. I see hope, but I'm here and I'm just thinking that we need to make this education system values based. And I say this because I believe that if we're able to penetrate values into the walls of our schools, into the lives of all stakeholders, then I believe we'll move mountains. It's C.S. Lewis once said that education without values, as important as it is, makes man a more clever devil. And I want us to come to the point that where with all the stakeholders and all the engagement, everything else, if only we can begin to penetrate values into our people, particularly our young people, then I believe we'll see some tremendous changes taking place in our entire system, in our entire nation, in our region, in the world as a whole. People will see things differently. As the young lady spoke this morning quite impressively, we'll see labels being removed from children. We'll see the libels being removed. We'll see limits being removed. We'll take the cap off and let our children, be who they are, in their fullest potential being achieved. I just want us to understand that for a long time now, we've been laminating values on the walls of our schools, our business places. Why not? Let's begin to live those values. Let's begin to live. And once we begin to live those values, we'll see tremendous changes occurring in our system, and we'll see growth and development to sustain not only our individual countries, but the region as a whole. I thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much for that contribution. Any reflection on that, Bjorn?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with that. And thank you for making the point so powerfully. I want to come back to an earlier point, which is what will we stop doing? If we move towards values-based education, which I think is absolutely the right way to do it, what are we going to stop? Like, for example, let me say, like, to be radical, are we going to stop all examinations in primary school? For the first 6 years, children do not sit examinations at all. Is that acceptable? So we have to, I agree with all of this. We need to move towards values-based education, towards competencies, we need to be inclusive, but what are the things that we can let go of? How prepared are we to make radical changes and say, right, we're going to move towards values? What that means is we need to do a lot of teacher professional development. We need to generate more time. We need to take the stress of examinations away from teachers and from children. Are we prepared to do that? I mean, that's only one option. I often mention that because it's quite a radical thing to say. There's, of course, many other less radical things we could do. But I do think these are really great ideas, and I fully support them. But how do we implement it? How do we actually change the way schools operate?
Wow, well said. And I think it ties into one of the questions from Joycelyn Blake Brown. She noted that we focus a lot on ranking students against each other rather than measuring the learning outcomes. Why not focus on alternative assessment? So I think that goes along with some of the things you're mentioning around, are we willing to give up our examinations and all of the crazy things we do to prepare our children for examinations? I wanted to go back to a couple of questions on our Q&A, and I noticed we have another hand up from Dr. Fiona Phillips. So I see your hand, but just give us a little moment. I want to make sure that we're covering ground. Is consideration given to building capacity through parent training, especially early childhood, so right at the beginning where parents are the ones most involved? And this is from Jacqueline Inglis. What is your thoughts on that?
I think we take that forward as a suggestion. I think we'll revisit the whole aspect of training and that kind of professional support for parents as well as for teachers and other stakeholders. So I think it's a very good suggestion that we will take forward.
Thank you for that. I think there's another question about the community by Selma Bissett, which is reminiscent of a previous question we had, and we agreed in terms of looking at the environment of the child. And so I'm going to go to Dr. Fiona Phillip. I think please raise your hand again if it's not raised, so we make sure we open your mic. Yes, so that you can make your comment. Fiona Phillip Maya.
Thank you so very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone. Good morning to everyone. Fiona Phillip Meyer of St. Lucia in the capacity of Chief Education Officer. And I'm sitting here and I'm loving the discussion and making the various comparisons. And I really, really appreciated the input about values education that came through. And for me, I kept looking at that accountability and leadership and just focusing on it in such a big way, because it is one of the areas that I've really felt over the years that our leaders, our school leaders, our administrators are, I would say, quite bluntly, so powerful, because many of our leaders are at various schools, various institutions for an extended period of time. So very much what the school becomes, the culture of the school, the expectations, the teaching and learning, sometimes the curriculum, so much of that is impacted by the leaders. So the values education is something very significant to me. I'm also looking at the point being made. I mean, I heard the word radical. And sometimes I think we have to be radical. But I'm also aware that within our context, I would also consider myself having some radical thoughts. Because if I had a choice, even as capacity of Chief Education Officer, there would be no ranking. There would be no student assigned to a particular school because they got 80%. I would love to see, mixed level schools, but I also appreciate that we must have the resources at all of those schools. So being radical, one thing, how do we ensure that all of this discussion, the many we've had before, the many we will have after, on the Declaration of Education actually adds value, changes the status quo for our children, be they gifted, be they may have various disabilities, average, vocationally bent, those who want to do more traditional subjects. How do we ensure that this Declaration of Education does not simply become another document, but changes the way we see education, but more importantly for me, how we implement moving forward? Thank you.
Wow, thank you for that. I think part of the answer to your question is right here, right now, the way in which we are engaging and really looking to see how we can make this document, if I use a word from Dr. Jules, a living document that we then all of us, the responsibility will be with all of us. This specific area, talking about partnership and collaboration, I mentioned a village. It really is with all of us, with every one of us. What are the things that we can do? What are the radical moves that we can make or suggest? How can we push for and advocate for the changes we need in our systems? So thank you very much for that, Dr. Phillip Myers.
Could I just come in on that very briefly? I wanted to plug the OECS Academic Recovery Program, like some of you are aware of this. And some of you might also be aware that this is actually something that was picked up by CARICOM. So it was initially developed in the OECS as the Academic Recovery Program, and it's then been picked up by CARICOM under the Learning, Recovery and Enhancement Program, Let's Read. And one of the plans with that program are actually to offer support to ministries and schools precisely in the area of leadership. That means not just for the principals, but also for leadership within the schools, leadership for the teachers. And I think that's that might be a great forum to push these ideas further forward. So if there are people in this audience that feel particularly strongly about the issue of leadership, then let's reconnect on those things as well and see whether some of those things could infuse, these plans at the slightly broader, at the CARICOM level, but that of course the OECS is included in that, and of course we can still shape it in the way that suits the Eastern Caribbean.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. We are wrapping up now quickly. We just have a few more minutes. I saw one person put their camera on. I'm not sure if they wanted to speak. I think that was Bernice Lewis. Oh, okay. No, okay. So I don't think we have any other hands up at this time. So I just would like to, I'm just looking back through the questions to make sure there isn't any other questions that we didn't answer. Values-based accountability and leadership. So, okay, I have two participants with raised hands. So let me see. Okay, Eldine Henry, followed by Angel. So we have 5 minutes. So please keep your intervention short because we want to have as much engagement as possible. Go ahead, Eldine. Eldine, are you able to open your mic? Okay. I'm not sure if we're having technical difficulties or if Eldine still would like to speak. Maybe she can put something in the chat. And I can go to Angel.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I just wanted to touch just quickly on the issue of data in relation to research, considered a byproduct, but maybe it's something that we should explicitly address in the Declaration on Education. I think one of the things that will strengthen our decision making and maybe 5-10 years down the line, looking at how we can infuse research at every stage that we're looking at here, for every article, how we can have research being done on whether these things that we're thinking are going to be effective in the OECS context, whether they really will be effective and how effective they will be, so that we can continue to make smart decisions at every step of the way. And I think that will be part of our organizational learning. We can keep pausing and looking at what the research in our context is telling us about the things that we are doing.
So Angel, you're breaking up quite a bit, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying in terms of being intentional with regards to research. So I'm gonna allow Beyond to come in. I think maybe once you've heard me, there may be a delay with your bandwidth.
Yeah. I mean, just to say, from what I could hear, it was a little bit choppy, but from what I could hear, I think I fully agree. I think this is also, I think you've pointed out a gap in the declaration. So I think we should think about how we can talk about those, the role of research, the role of evidence, having evidence-based decision making, and all of that. So yes, I 100% agree.
So for my closing, I'll just bring attention to one comment. Life is one that is constantly changing. Teaching children to adjust in different situations is critical. All fingers aren't equal, but teaching flexibility and adaptability is key. So how can this be factored into the declaration? So this is the last thought I want to leave you with, Bjorn. And can you give us just some closing words on how we move forward with this declaration.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, the discussion today is reminded me of a little bit of evidence that we do have. What is the biggest influence on children's learning in the early years and in primary? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about this. If you had to put your finger on it, what is the biggest factor that determines children's learning in early primary? And actually, the research says it's teacher expectation. It's not actually your background, it's not your socioeconomic setting, it's not whether you have a disability or not, it's actually teacher expectation. And so we've seen today that we all have high aspirations, and I think that is a very, very positive way forward, because we need to have, if we have high aspirations for the education system and we can empower teachers to have high expectations of children, then learning will take place. So it's been a really inspiring discussion. I'm really touched by all the comments that we've had and by people's sort of responses and willingness to engage in the discussion. So I've really, really enjoyed the session, and I hope that this discussion will continue. It will continue into the Google Doc for the declaration that we have. And, Carleen, Rafa and others, people can just reach out to us through the channels that we've established to continue with this discussion. And it'll be a little while before we finalize the declaration. So there actually is a genuine opportunity for people to come in and contribute to that discussion. Thank you so much, Carleen.
Thank you so much. Back over to you, Tahira, and beyond. Just a reminder to stop sharing your screen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hassler, Dr. Radix, and all of our participants for such an interesting and engaging session. I especially appreciated the focus on the how in this session. Once we've identified what it is that we would like to achieve, how do we identify the concrete steps to get to these goals, right? How do we implement? Certainly a lot to unpack, and we would be looking forward to your continued support as we seek to move forward in this regard. Now we're going to take a break for just about 10 minutes to give you a chance to reflect, stretch your legs, and grab some refreshments. But before we do that, we did launch a poll earlier in the morning, just after Marika's presentation, and we're going to put that up on the screen for you now so that you can see the results of that poll. Hopefully we're able to get the graphic on the screen. There you go. And I think it's representative of what we all would have experienced with Marika. It was an excellent presentation, truly inspirational. We're having a great morning thus far. So we're going to let you have a break, and we look forward to seeing you in a few minutes.
Dear Miss, with all that has changed within our education system the last few months, we just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you for being patient with us.
Thank you for also being patient with Mom and Dad.
Thank you for making our classes fun and exciting even though they were virtual. You have been awesome.
You have been kind.
You have been strong. For all of us.
We've missed our friends,
but we're glad you've been right by our side.
So for now, have a great summer break. You deserve it.
Enjoy.
But before you go,
Nouveau Lady, merci.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope you're ready for this afternoon's session. We hope that it will be very engaging. To kick off this next section, we invite teachers from various OECS member states for frank discussion on education from the front lines. Please join me in welcoming Bernice Lewis from St. Lucia, Frankson Marshall from Grenada, Samantha Blondell from St. Kitts and Nevis, and Janata Harrington from the Commonwealth of Dominica. Mrs. Lisa Sargosing, Technical Specialist at the OECS Education Development Management Unit, will support the discussion as moderator. Welcome all. The floor is yours.
We have teacher continuous training. Generally, in most of the OECS countries, there is a teachers college, and then there's that. But unlike the USA and Canada, there is not consistent teacher license every year. So it is quite possible that you are qualified as a teacher at 25, and you can literally learn nothing new going forward.
Teachers, they should have less work to do. When we have to do all the housekeeping, all the stats, then we have to do the work for the counselors, and we have to collect data for them.
It might be a problem of not being able to think of education strategically and having it be relevant both to the client, the students, and or the other stakeholders, as well as to your country's economy.
The lack of resources, and that is both for the student at home, for the child at home, and our meager classrooms that we have. We still have these empty shelves that have absolutely nothing in it to engage children who are so technology driven, and they are bored.
Inadequate family support to students. If you look at the best performers at CSEC and at primary and pre-level, they mostly, not always, but mostly come from homes of professional people. Because too often we quote researchers that are outside of our context.
Learning shouldn't be hard. It should actually be very easy.
But I'm also concerned too about the quality of the education. You know, it's one thing to allow all the kids to go to school, that is fine. It's quite another when you have to look at the quality of the education that they are receiving. And I am seeing that sometimes the children who come from the professional homes and go to the supposedly better schools with better resources, sometimes better teachers, they get ahead, they get that quality education. But those who are of the lower socioeconomic, in the lower socioeconomic bracket, you find that yes, they are given that equal opportunity to go to school, but equitable, the equitable part of it, we do not see so much. We need to create leaders, these real dynamic leaders, strategic thinking leaders at every level of our education system. I would also like to see more dynamic leadership, strategic leadership in our education systems. I would like to see leadership that values critical thinking, innovation, and so that we can, our economies can flourish.
To keep our teachers dynamic, we need to give them reasons to hope and believe. Because the only way to change the system is that people with hope and belief get in there. And I think fundamentally, to address the dynamic challenges that teaching possesses, because it's never the same from society as it moves through its existence, is people with hope and a willingness to do.
CXC, when it comes to math, can break it in half. They could give math 1 and then math 2. CXC reminds me of how the Cambridge Syndicate used to be for A levels. You remember that? When you had to base all of your work on 2 years?
Yes,
and so it was so overwhelming at the end, you know. A lot of children, well, I was one of them. You felt like you were gonna die under the stress and the strain.
The place I want to see education going is to create a more dynamic learning environment.
You hear of exchange programs between the US and possibly Canada all the time, and we are so close to each other. So why aren't we doing exchange programs as well?
I think there should be continuous communication among teachers. When we started CPA in Grenada, and even the standards, there were growing pains. And it would have been nice to be able to hear from other teachers what they experienced and what were their points of solutions.
I would really, really want to see an education system that is balanced. So we have skills as well as the pure academics, and it is inclusive. So everyone feels that they have something to contribute, that they are relevant to the economies of the country and to the sub-region is worthwhile.
Okay. Samantha, Bernice, Frankson, and Janita, thank you so much, teachers, for candidly sharing your perspectives on barriers to educational advancement in the region. Likewise, the future that you would like to see for OECS education. I'm Lisa Sarju-Singh-Terrence from the EDMU, and I would like to probe some more into some of the themes that you have raised and see how we can connect some of these to the tentative ones in our draft OECS Declaration on Education. We will do so by allowing you to expand a bit on what you've presented and by inviting the contributions or questions from our audience. Audience, I simply want you to raise your hand and add your voice to the teachers' conversations. For our French participants, n'hésitez pas à écrire en commentaire ou poser des questions dans le chat ou simplement échanger avec nos professeurs, nos enseignants. Okay, now there are quite a few things that I picked up from the segment where you're speaking about the barriers, but Samantha, I think there is something that resonated with me, and I don't mind if you expand a bit on it because I thought it was a little bit emotionally loaded. I think at some point you made the comment about learning shouldn't be hard. Learning shouldn't be hard. And this is so important considering that our vision for education is for every learner to succeed. Samantha, please, would you expand on this notion a bit and even perhaps address the issue of, you know, why is learning hard? Who is contributing to it? Just expand a bit on that for us, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yes, learning should not be hard. The best way I relate to teaching is in a scientific sense, because that's what I do. I teach a lot of science and math. And so I always say, when you wish to dig a hole, you would rather use a digger, right? Or if you need to travel to school, you would prefer to drive a car, because if you live very far, that's what you need to do. So hence machines were created to make work easier. So why not apply this to teaching, you know? So the act of teaching is a sort of machine that should be used to make learning easier and fun, more fun. Yes, hi, sorry about that. So yes, more fun. So a fun way to teach concepts is to use patterns. That's what I've found in my teaching strategy. I use a lot of patterns. Patterns take the stress out of learning and the teaching and makes it more both engaging and therefore more interactive. And children learn faster that way too. They could interact more, and it becomes a part of them fast. So once all of the cogwheels of teaching are properly placed in motion, then both teaching and learning can become more effective and more efficient. So that's how I see it. Implementing.
Thanks for sharing that. Yes, yeah. Samantha. And you spoke about the importance of teaching certain patterns. And of course, that goes back to our teacher training, knowing how to teach those patterns, knowing the approaches and methods. And that reminds me of a comment I think that Frank made. Frankson, you made a comment early on about our teacher training. Do you want to just comment further on that? Is there an issue there with our teacher training and not allowing us to continue to take those methods and approaches into the classroom? Just speak to that a little bit, Frankson.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and good morning to the listening and viewing audience, and hello to everyone. Swartz, Bransford, and Sears in 2005 said that individuals who are similarly adaptive have the cognitive power to rearrange their environments and their thinking as they encounter new problems and novel information. As teachers, we are fundamentally problem solvers. Article 2.2 speaks to resilience in the education system. Article 5.2 speaks to teacher training. The idea here is that teacher training should be continuous. We would have we'd have summarily our qualifications and our BSc and so forth, but it should be consistent because the challenges we face from day to day, from term to term, are different. And it keeps us engaged because I think the only thing worse than death is boredom and apathy. And we should all aim to be the teacher who wants to always learn. And that is the best way we can serve our students, because fundamentally we are here, we exist for the benefit of our students. And that's why I think continuous teacher training is important. So we are up to date on strategies and new challenges and solutions, and we can do the best in our context and our classrooms.
That's interesting, your point about continuous professional development. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the OECS professional development model that was released sometime, perhaps last year, where it speaks to the varieties of engagements or activities that we can engage in to develop ourselves professionally. And for us to move from that traditional way of training, just in a formal setting, but understanding that professional development can take place in so many different ways. So I'm hoping in the region, Frankson, that we are appreciating that training and that development of our skill as teachers is something that has to be continuously sharpened. But interestingly, you were saying that the teacher must want to learn. So does that really rest with the teacher? Because I know sometimes there's always that cry that we don't have the opportunities, not much is provided for us. I think these days there is quite a bit. So is it really now an issue of teachers now having that motivation and that desire to want to learn and to continuously grow?
I think it is twofold. As a teacher, you can become pigeonholed in your own little corner of the world that is your classroom. So you must take the initiative. But additionally, governments can do as well. Now, I know in Grenada, our Ministry of Education tries really hard. As a matter of fact, I've just enrolled in a program via the Ministry of Education, Effective Pedagogy for Distributed Teaching and Learning. And these are the kind of opportunities. We must also acknowledge that as much as the initiative you have as teachers, we have as teachers, remuneration is always a concern. And many times out your own initiative, it has to be your own financial burden. And you would have heard my colleagues speak about the family commitments and others. So it would be nice that in combination with the initiatives, we have more avenues from our administrators as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm seeing an interesting comment from, I think, Beverly LeBlanc as well as Leandra. Beverly saying that the teacher has to want to learn and translate their learning into practice. And I think that supports exactly what you're saying, Frankson. And interestingly, Leandra is adding to that the CPD, which is continuous professional development, must be driven by constant needs assessment among teachers. And I mean, this is powerful, Leandra. Thanks for sharing that, because the needs of yesterday are not necessarily the needs today. And I mean, COVID has proven that to us. All of us in the education system, what do we have to do now? Don't we have to go and get retooled and reskill and learn things that the teachers' colleges or other places never provided? Okay, so this is such a very sound contribution there, Leandra. Thanks for that. And that just reminds me of something recent that we are offering to our region. again, because we understand that our teacher training did not really equip us in those days, or even recently, with how to engage in distributed teaching and learning. Our region has responded to that. And I'm telling you, as of this week, we have over 1,000 teachers who are now pursuing training in effective pedagogies in distributed teaching and learning through the Eastern Caribbean Joint Board of Teacher Education. Okay, so I mean, it's encouraging that we are moving to that from a situation where people complained about not being exposed to enough training and not getting enough of it to that state where I can say confidently that it is available right now. The OECS is responding to those calls. But going back to your point, Frankson, and I think even Leandra, we as teachers, and I say we because I'm from that profession, we have to want to continuously improve and to build ourselves as our context change. All right? Okay, so I know there are a number of... did I hear comments? Is that you, Jennifer?
Yes,
Lovely.
it is.
Please.
Can I just step in there as well and just piggyback on what you are saying? The information is out there. We have these resources available to us. And as Frankson and Leandra is saying, we have to want to go out there and grab it. Teachers are first and foremost learners. That is what we need to understand. And in order to bring quality into that quality dimension into our teaching, we need to appreciate quality within ourselves and quality in advancing ourselves. So we need to get up, we need to get on. True, as Frankson mentioned, we will need support sometimes because it can get costly, but there are many opportunities through UNESCO, through the OECS, even through Google, where we can actually get these opportunities and make them work for us as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for adding to that, Janita. I'm just noticing an interesting question from Trevelyn Bonaparte. Trevelyn is asking us, teachers, where is the training and continued professional development for our teachers? He's asking, where is it? Would anybody like to respond? And Bernice, I have a feeling you would like to. Yes, go ahead.
So by way of introduction, in 2015, I completed a master's in learning sciences and technology. And yesterday, the speaker's message grabbed at my heartstrings because this is exactly what I studied. How do people learn? How do you assess their psychological, where they are psychologically, where they are in building mental schemas, and all the facets that actually make people learn. And when I came back, I put together a teacher's workshop to teach exactly that, to train teachers on how children and people generally learn. Because when we do a teacher training, our teacher certificate, you do go through that a little bit, but you do not go into depth into the science behind learning. And I have this workshop all planned out. I have put it into place for other schools, but it's still there, and I would love an opportunity to share it with any organization who's willing to allow me to share the knowledge with other teachers in the region. So I think this is just awesome.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bernice. Great. I want to maybe just look at one of the other themes that some of you raised in your conversation. And I think it was, Janita, I may need to call you on again. It speaks to quality and equity. You made that comment, and my mind went right back to our draft article number 3 in our declaration that says, that picks up on 3 areas as it pertains to quality and equity. One, that every person has the right to basic and secondary education. 2, it speaks about the elimination of discrimination. And 3, quality education in terms of facilitating the development, the full development of all abilities. Now, Janita, I heard you echo that statement about the need for quality and equity. And I just wanted to know from your perspective, whether in our draft declaration so far, we were picking up on all the core components of that area. Again, from your perspective as a teacher, is there anything missing, anything that we need to add to that?
Well, in going through, having gone through the articles, I find it was very well put together, really targeted what I think should be our central focus. However, one area, I know when we refer to all learners, we are also referring to pre-primary school, but I'm very concerned that early childhood education was not given so much of a central focus in these articles. And I would really like to see it spelled out, because I think in the preamble, that's one of the concerns that is listed there, that access to pre-primary education. And I think a speaker prior mentioned as well, I think a lot of it has to do with identifying these gaps early and dealing with these gaps early, so that by the time the students head into primary school, we are building and we are just taking them through and nurturing and leading them towards the path that they are supposed to follow. So I would really, really like to see more focus placed on early childhood early childhood education in the draft.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. And I'm seeing some applause coming from Amanda on that comment that you're making there, Janita. And something tells me I don't think it's overlooked, but perhaps maybe included in the whole notion of pre-primary, because you know some of our in our different regions we organize them quite differently. I can tell you at EDMU we don't overlook early childhood, but Janita, if we have to spell it out a little more explicitly, we will. Okay,
I would be grateful.
Thanks so much for identifying that. Yes, Bernice?
Yes, to add to what Janet said, and the OECS has been doing great work with the early childhood program. I've been following that. And I think, you know, in the past few days, we've been discussing the quality of the education and, you know, as Samantha reiterated earlier, making learning fun. So in pre-primary, there are a lot of children who are so scared of learning. They're so scared of performing, and we just make it so hard for them that they just close up, they clamp up, and they learn self-helplessness kicks in, and they just don't want to do anything. So then when you get to the secondary school, you have these children who do not want to try. So it's a roadblock. There's no point in even trying to assist them, because it's going to take, well, I wouldn't say would not try, but that's a huge, huge stumbling block.
Yes, thanks for that, Bernice. I think we have a participant. Idella, would you like to make a contribution? I think we noticed your hand up at some point. Idella, as well as Ian Hippolyte, our host will allow you access to the mic. Feel free. I think we saw a hand up from Idella. Ferdinand, do you still want to make a contribution? Okay.
In the interim, I would like to mix.
Yes, Frankson, I saw your hand. Yes, go ahead.
That article relating to quality and equity of re-education also refers to access. And sometimes I think our view of access to education is narrow. We tend to think that access only starts when the students get into the classroom. We have to also be aware that as teachers, we have our own biases, and we can be in a classroom with students, and different students may be receiving different access based on how we teach. We may be teaching value-loaded concepts. When you teach a family, do you teach a nuclear family as ideal? I heard the speaker before speak about communicating high expectations to the students? Do we foster these high expectations in the higher achievers and the well-to-do and the well-dressed child, and do not communicate that same type of desire from those from a lower socioeconomic background? So a fundamental part of equity and equal access and quality of education is a teacher being introspective and reflective and say, hey, am I doing my best? What are my biases? What are my errors, and how I can do better?
Thanks for that. Okay.
Let me just step in there as well, Lisa. Yes, let me just step in there as well. And Frank is really spot on, because the hidden curriculum, a lot of things we do, we pass that on. We pass a lot of things on to students without even realizing it. Our implicit biases cause that to happen. And it is true. I can relate to that. I went to one of the prestigious all-girls school in Dominica. And when I started teaching at this school, where it's basically lower, students of the low socioeconomic bracket, I did not know, I wasn't aware that there were students who came to school hungry, who came to school without having their textbooks, who came to school, and I had to relearn. And it has been instrumental to the kind of teacher I am today. So I really agree with what Frank is saying. A lot of what we pass on through the hidden curriculum, for our own biases, we need to be careful, and we need to really be introspective, and we really need to have reflection at the end of that day.
I agree totally. Thanks for that, Janita. I want us to look at, I know you spent a bit of time, teachers, talking about the barriers. And I mean, it's not sufficient to just look at them. We have to look at maybe some of the practical recommendations on how it is that we can overcome some of those barriers that you have identified. So do you have any suggestions as to how we can overcome the list of barriers that you somewhat itemized for us? Any of you could chime in?
Sorry. I can go ahead?
Go ahead, Frank. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, yeah. One of those is born out of this. I think this is a wonderful platform. I must compliment the OECS for fostering this, because in our small corner of the Caribbean, we have very similar and common challenges, and we can work together to collaborate to find solutions. As I was saying in our first interview, I shouldn't have to wait. This is my 18th year. I should have known Juanita and Bernice and the others before, so we can work together, because when at the open campus, we meet in learning. So we already have that platform. We can be structured where government spearhead the initiative, where teachers of mathematics and CXC meet to review the curriculum and present, or it can be unstructured where there's a shared workspace for grades 5 and 6 teachers in CPEA who would share lesson plans and assessments, ask for advice and communicate. And that can bring about authentic, organic collaboration and can eventually bring about long-term results. And I think that is one of the things that we should foster more.
I like that, organic, yes, something that is so natural. And Frank, I want to encourage you, because, and let you know that some of it has started already. There are different platforms and hubs that are being set up these days to just facilitate that type of collaboration. It's happening, okay? But we're listening to you, we are hearing you. I see a hand up from Gianetti George. Ms. George, please go ahead and join the conversation.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and good morning to everyone. And again, to the panelists, the presenters of Voices of the OECS teachers. I mean, colleagues, you've brought to the fore some poignant and valuable points. And we must admit that none of them are new, but they are reoccurring. And you know, as we participate in this conference and we reflect, I think all of us can agree that we are ready to join this paradigm shift. And we spoke yesterday a lot about redefining, innovating, evolving, improving. But the truth is that until we kind of reconcile with the fact that there were certain things we did that did not contribute to success of students, and then we can give ourselves permission to forgive ourselves for the times when we were not able to ensure success, we cannot make the paradigm shift. So today I'm saying to all of you, me included, all of us, let us give ourselves permission to forgive ourselves as we move on, as we do engage in this paradigm shift, okay? Also to Mr. Marshall, you spoke to continuous training, you know, and you even spoke about licensure. That's something that we've been speaking about for years and years and years. But the truth is, if it cannot be something that just happens right away, instantaneously, in a short time, because guess what? A lot of people will be traumatized by it. But and I'm hearing Selma saying, my colleague Selma saying, yes, we have the solutions, as was said yesterday. One of the ways perhaps we can think about transitioning is to embrace the OECS PD model. And Lisa, you spoke about it. And just to remind people, it has 4 pillars. It speaks to competency-based PD, teacher-led, personalized, anytime, anywhere. Now, perhaps if we incorporate that into our national appraisal instrument, right, where every teacher is expected to engage in a certain number of hours per term or per year, and we have already identified a number of opportunities that are now being presented, like the effective pedagogy for distributed teaching and learning, or we can do courses from Coursera, like blended or future learn. We have opportunities now. So if we can commit to engaging a certain number of hours and follow the PD model, that is one way to ensure that there is continuous training without making the big leap to licensure, which we may not be ready for. So that is something for us to consider. Also to Ms. Harrigan, I love when you spoke about your vision for leadership. And you know, I heard Dr. Myers speak about it this morning. So important. And you know, it struck me that do teachers, parents, other stakeholders, do they have a platform or mechanism by which they can critique the performance of our education leaders? Yes. What's in place?
Good point. Good point.
Yes. And also, do we have regionally acceptable standards that have been agreed upon and documented that we can all follow? Do we acknowledge education leaders who demonstrate the ideal qualities? Now, Article 7.3 speaks to this, so hopefully we can ensure that we expand it and incorporate this. Also, too, you spoke to collaboration. Let me tell you, that's a big thing. It's a big thing, and as Frank said, we should all know each other. I mean, look at us, by virtue of our size, we should all know each other, but we don't. So how can we mitigate? What can we do? So as we build and engage in PLCs and work collaboratively, how about if we ensure that we stop practicing hoarding of best practices? That's the best way I can describe it, hoarding of best practices. Because oftentimes we hear about the negative. We speak about that freely. What's wrong? All the things that are wrong. How often do we speak about all the things that are right? And do we document those best practices? Do we record them? Do we share them? Can we replicate in other contexts, in other environments? So may I propose that perhaps the OECS can help to facilitate another regional conference where we can share best practices as what we have seen in the classrooms. So voices of OECS teachers, we heard you loudly and widely. Thank you very much for your contribution. And again, remember, let's forgive ourselves and move forward. Okay, thank you.
So much, Giannetti, and we heard you loudly and clearly, and we've documented quite a few of the sound contributions that you have made, quite a few things. Thank you so much for that input, Giannetti. Teachers, my gosh, I wish we had a little more time, but I know you also spent time talking about where you see our education heading to. And one of the things that I noted was that everything that you mentioned seemed to be things that are already happening. They are current, they're happening now. Okay, so I'm just going to give each of you maybe about 2 seconds to just tell us how differently you want to see these ideas manifested. How differently. Okay, so perhaps we could start with you at the bottom, Janita, then go up to Samantha, Frank, and then Bernice. Okay?
Okay. Well, my vision for education really in the OECS sub-region is quite simple. An education system that takes into account everybody, as the declaration said. But in order to do that, we need to look at the whole person. We need to look past our discrimination. We need to look at where people are at. And how are we going to move them from where they are, given their particular context, to where they need to be to benefit themselves, their families, as well as their countries and our wider sub-region. It's very simple. I know it's complex, but that is simply what I want to see.
Thank you, Janita. Your take, Samantha.
Oh, so how I see it is that, first of all, before we start teaching, we need to learn the culture of the school, which is very important. And we need to learn our children. And then from there, in our teaching practice, we could relate what we are teaching to real world problems, real life, and everything, so that the children wouldn't feel like learning is separate from real life. So that'll be a very important thing to apply to our teaching practice in school.
Spot on. Great, thanks for that, Samantha. Frank?
Hargreaves and Fink in 2006 said, changing education is easy to propose, hard to implement, and extraordinarily difficult to sustain. My vision is that in the education system in the OECS, that we as teachers do our best to be trained and continuously learn, continuously develop ourselves, so that we become the best professionals possible, because the greatest resource we have in our small islands is our people. And as teachers, we are charged in adding value to these people and building our societies. And I just want us to just keep improving and having hope so that we can do better.
Thanks for that, Frank. Bernice?
So my vision is for us to be able to quickly revolutionize education as it is right now, to add, passion into our classrooms, to create a more holistic approach where we can see mentorship, we can see teacher training, we can see more funding being funneled into our schools. And we need our classrooms to change, and we need to have more dynamic classrooms where we have games going on, we have smart classrooms going on, we have projectors and internet and AR and VR start to be implemented into the classroom so we can awaken our children so they can reach their full potential, every last one of them.
Well said, all of you. Thank you so much, teachers. And as the frontliners, we are counting on all of you to just continue to be the change makers in our education system. I really thank you again for very frankly sharing in that conversation with us this morning. I thank those who participated through the chat, the Q&A, and for those who were brave enough to take the mic and add to that conversation. It is one that has to continue. Okay, so thank you, teachers. Thank you, Frank, Samantha, Janita, and Bernice. You have represented your member states excellently. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back
Thank you
to
for the
Tahira.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our teachers and Mrs. Lisa Sargasing, Terrence. I have a smile on my face because it was just lovely to see that level of collaboration amongst you all. And it was reassuring as well to note that we are basically on the same page as it relates to personal development, in teacher development. So that is definitely reassuring that we seem to be headed in the right direction. What stood out to me most in this session, and I know that it struck a chord with some of you as well, because I saw your comments, was what Bernice shared, that, through her research and through her classroom, she was able to put together a presentation of best practices that could be readily shared with other teachers in the region to share that knowledge. And I saw that Gianetti George posted in the comments immediately after she said that, asking for her email address, so that she can have access to that presentation as well. And I believe it was Frank that mentioned that, it took him 18 years before he was able to touch base and connect with some of these other teachers that we're hearing from today. So this is definitely the way that we want to be moving forward, to make it easier for our teachers. I think it was Gianetti that said we want to stop hoarding best practices. Definitely, this is something that we want to be sharing easily amongst our teachers. Thank you so much for such an engaging presentation. Now, I know quite a lot of you had your hands up and we were not able to get to you because we must move along with the program. But what we're asking you is to keep those questions in mind. And in our next segment, hopefully with the youth session, you may be able to raise your hand and include your comments then. So we're going to take a break right now, and we're going to be treated by an artistic presentation from student Genevieve McMaster of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Enjoy.
I will trust in you and know that you are with me forever. I'll confide in you, 'cause you're the only answer that matters. Even in the darkness, you will be my light. Even when I'm hopeless, you will be my guide. See, I will not be shaken, I will not be moved. Even in the chaos, I know that you're good. You're the keeper, you're the protector. It is you that holds us together. When everything else fails us, it is you that holds us together. I will trust in you, your plans and thoughts of me, they are good, and I wait on you, 'cause I know you will see me through. And even in the chaos, you will be my light. Even when I'm hopeless, you will be my guide. See, I will not be shaken, I will not be moved. Even in the chaos, I know that you're good. Yeah. You're the keeper, you're the protector. It is you that holds us together. When everything else fails us, it is you that holds us together. You're the keeper, you're the protector. It is you that holds us together. When everything else fails us, it is you that holds us together. Holds us together. You're the keeper, you're the protector. It is you that holds us together. When everything else fails us, it is you that holds us together. It is you that holds us together. When everything else fails us, it is you that holds us together. You're the keeper, you're the protector. It is you that holds us together. When everything else fails us, it is you that holds us together.
Such talent. Thank you for this lovely rendition, Genevieve. A strong message, especially at this time when everything else fails us. Our faith holds us together. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a youth panel discussion on education for the future. Join me in welcoming youth panelists Brittany McDonald from Antigua and Barbuda, Antonia Laricher from Martinique, and Rahim Augustine Joseph from St. Lucia. Moderating this session is Mr. Odion Mark Hillocks from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. All of these panelists are from the OECS Youth Advisory Network. Welcome, everyone. The floor is yours.
Just want to check and ensure that all of my panelists have their videos on. Okay. Members of cabinet, ambassadors, permanent secretaries, chiefs of education from around the region, directors, other invitees, staff of the various ministries, staff of the OECS Commission, other education partners, and other enthusiasts, a pleasant morning to all. It is often expressed how powerful education can be, from quotes such as, "Education is the passport to the future, for it belongs to those who prepare for it today," by Malcolm X, to Nelson Mandela saying, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." And we continue to acknowledge its importance in our draft declaration on education, where we state a resilient education system is the cornerstone of a resilient society. As we continue the OECS Education Forum 2021 under the theme Towards a Learning Crescendo, we bring together youth from across the region to discuss the topic, Education for the Future. We would like to have an interactive session, hence, we encourage you, the audience, to pose any questions or any comments, and feel free to raise your hand if you wish to unmute your mic to give a contribution. So without further ado, I will now allow each panelist to introduce themselves, and let's dive into discussion. Brittany, we can start with you.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. My name is Brittany McDonald. I am representing Antigua and Barbuda, and I am a project management consultant. I have a project management company, as well as I provide technical services to the government of Antigua and Barbuda on their capital projects. A bit of my education background, I went through the system here in Antigua and Barbuda from primary all the way up to through high school. And then I also received my bachelor's in international relations and culminating in my master's in computer information systems.
Nice. Rahim?
Good morning, everybody. Let me first, of course, thank you, Odion, and the others for having me in this panel. Very quickly, my name is Rahim Augustine Joseph. I am from St. Lucia, as previously stated by yourself, and I am a second-year student at the University of the West Indies Gable campus, studying political science and law. And prior to that, I would have been at the South Louis Community College in St. Lucia. I've always had a passion for education. I think of myself, at least even in the future, as an academic. Because I think really, as you would have mentioned prior, it really is the passport to the future. And therefore, to that extent, I'm happy to be part of engagements like these. I enjoy debating, I enjoy reading, I enjoyed everything education. And therefore, we'll get to a very fruitful discussion today as to what we believe is the future of education in the region.
Thank you. And Sonia?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be there with you all today. I am Mrs. Antonia Lacho. I worked at the Embassy of France. I'm in charge of educational cooperation, mostly focuses on student mobility and the promotion of French as a passport for higher education. A bit of my background, I did 5 years as an English teacher in Martinique, a year at South Louis as a French and communication lecturer, and now I work at the Embassy of France.
Okay,
thank you.
Nice. As we begin the discussion, I would like to start with the question, what vision do you have for the future of education here in the OECS? And we can actually go in reverse order. The last shall be first and the first shall be last, right? So Antonia.
So being myself an example of the power of language within education, I want to first start by quoting a philosopher named Roger Bacon of the 13th century. He said, "Knowledge of languages is the doorway to wisdom." I see languages as the future for education, especially in our context, in the Caribbean, where we know that we have a lack of higher education. Using languages as a tool, as a strategic tool for the pursuit of higher education and knowledge, and no longer as a hobby.
Okay. Rahim, what is your vision for education in the OECS?
Yeah, very quickly, I think already the vision, without even at least being too fanatical about it, is really that every person could have access. And even beyond that, that more than just everybody having that level of equitable access, that everybody is able to thrive in the respective education environment that they wish to have. And even beyond that, I think something that could definitely work a long time, and I think the process needs to start now, is that we continue, or rather we start to ensure that students really get to do what they want to do. And of course, we've continued to box people within this very narrow idea of really what it is that we think that they should do, without any input from students or young people generally, because of course we have already broken into their mentality from very early that you must be A, B, C, D, E, F, G to be within my house. And therefore, these institutional prejudices and stereotypes have caused people to sort of be boxed very narrowly into what it is that people want them to do, as opposed to what they want to do for themselves. And to that extent, I think a very liberating view of what education can do at a very base level is something that we need to be able to focus on, empowering every single individual from very, very early to understand that you are able to achieve everything that it is that you want via education. But of course, the resources must be equally there to be able to preserve it. And when I think of the liberating view of education, Udian, I really think of what Michael Manley really focused on in his time in politics. And he was making a very simple point that the person on the road, or the child of a vendor, should be able to aspire to the very same educational prospects or achievement as the CEO's daughter or son. And that really speaks to the philosophical underpinning of what education is supposed to reflect. And therefore, as I said, really my vision is access, equal access, equitable access among all people, having people being able to strive for excellence within the current environmental or educational environment that they exist, and really being able to have a liberating view, and people learn for knowledge, but not necessarily just for examination. So I think really it's some of these things that I speak to as being the vision for education within OECS. And of course, we can get into the discussion further.
All right. Brittany, how about you?
Great. I'm loving the vision so far. In terms of my point of view, I see it as preparation. What is the future that we're really preparing our young people for? And that's thinking about it from early childhood all the way up to adulthood, through adolescence. You know, what does that future look like? And for me, the main thing that we can do right now in terms of getting everyone on an equal footing is using technology as a tool and a resource to incorporate that equal equity that we're talking about, and that empowerment, you know. And so from that vision, again, revamping the curriculum, and not only by including technology, but reshaping how those subjects are taught, the information that's being processed, so that there are skills and, you know, certifications that they can receive after completing their education, so that they're job ready. And that will help us in terms of our economy in the OECS, because more companies, whether they're technologically based or not, they could be a financial company, they're looking to have globally distributed workforces. And we're better than the Caribbean because we have a bit of everything, I think about the recent pandemic that we're still in the I'm hoping to say in the ending phases of, but we saw that, there were programs provided by our governments for digital nomads. And, why can't we extend that so that we here in the Caribbean can equally take focus in those areas as well, because we have the people and we have and it's just about creating that opportunity. The next thing that I think we need to focus on for education in the future is making sure that there are pathways. As Raheem mentioned, we tend to put children into a box. Maybe they have to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, but there are other professions that are equally as profitable, so they'll be able to sustain their livelihood. But we're not telling them about those careers, and then they're finding out, maybe when they're 25 and realizing, hey, if I really want to do something that I love, that I can make money in, I have to maybe go back to school or get another certificate. Whereas if there are pathways that they can, learn transferable skills, so if they change their mind, they can say, hey, I decided I wanted to be maybe a civil engineer. Let me go over into mechanical engineering, but I would have had that background, to be able to apply those skills so that that transition is a bit easier. And I don't think that onus is only on the teachers, to guide. I think that's also for parents, as well as our government officials in education to be able to set up those infrastructures. And lastly, I wanted to touch on internships and apprenticeships, because in education, you're learning in academia, it's theories, it's textbooks, but actually going out and working with companies who are in the industry, who are working in those particular fields, then you realize, yes, this is something that I want to do, or no, this is completely not what I expected. Let me shift gears, because now I know what it's like to work for X company. I won't name any, but now I know what it's like to work for this company, and I know what their culture is like. I know what, they stand for, and I know what innovations that they're putting into our region. That's a company I want to get behind. It's not just about learning, chemistry or let me think of another subject that's not science, chemistry or artwork. Principles of accounts or principles of business, but what are these students really getting out of that experience? Being able to partner with companies, not just locally on our islands, but that are regional companies, and then also doing those exchanges. So I think it's a multi-tiered structure based on the OECS Declaration of Education that we need to implement. But it's not impossible. It just requires us to be, to have the fortitude to actually make these changes.
Right, and I agree with a lot of what you have said, and you have supportive comments as well in the chat saying that's true, Ms. McDonald. So, Antonia, I want to go back to what you said about learning languages, and we want to do it as to encourage opportunity for higher learning and not just as a hobby. And we know as it is right now in some of the I want to say the English speaking territories who do not have a French Creole that is practiced right now. Most of the students do French and Spanish almost haphazardly, simply having to choose one at Form 4 when they start their CSEC preparations. So could you expand a bit on what are some of the opportunities right now for persons to, one, learn French and then use that as an opportunity for higher learning?
Yes. Thank you, Mark. What we really need to do, as a region is to show at a very early age the importance of having a language, because knowing that in the Caribbean that there is, as I said again, a lack of quality higher education, and the other countries where they have that type of education most likely not speaking, most of the time is not speaking our language. So we have seen the numbers of years that people tend to learn French as a hobby, and now that we see, like, after you did secondary school, the students, they are talented. So after secondary school, they don't have no pathway because of what? Because of that barrier of the language most of the time, and also because of economical status. So what we're trying to do is showing them that if they choose, for example, French, there are outcomes. For example, now that Martinique and Guadeloupe is part of the OECS, we know that they have the universities there who are well accommodated with a variety of subjects, and there are scholarships as well. And there's so much advantages and opportunities out there. So we really want to inform the students and show them that, if you don't have to be brilliant either. The level is a B2 level. You don't have to be brilliant, to transfer to a French university or so on. But at least you need to have a minimum, be able to communicate. And most of the subject, most of the courses are now done in English. Why? Because we really want to come up and help the region and help our neighbors in terms of quality education. So that is what we're working on, and there are a lot of actions that is put in place towards that. As I said, being informed, we have now a place where it's called a corner campus France at the Alliance Française that we're willing to replicate, in the other territories, because we are in charge of 11 territories. So we're really willing to replicate it there. So we're just hoping that we can show the importance and the advantages in learning French as a language.
All right, great. So we have a comment here, quite a lengthy comment, stretching off of Rahim's point from Amanda Shillip. The discussion putting children into a box relates with the single or multi-track education discussion earlier. One of the overlooked aspects of the multi-track education is how important it is to have many backgrounds in one role. That is, we benefit when artists bring their skill sets, which are unique from their arts, into the investment spaces. Musicians, for instance, hear and analyze and feel differently and will diversify the funding or innovation. Likewise, having someone who is mathematically trained, who then becomes a field professional outside of math, brings those skills to the space. We are not speaking about what it means to have different types of minds in the workforce and how that propels innovation. A single track education is incongruent with 21st century workforce needs. Does anyone want to expand on that point, on that comment?
I just want to thank the person who made the intervention, because really it's a very, very important and pointed one, and already put into sharp focus what the future of work looks like. Because really in this era, we've made the point before that there is an over-reliance on the idea of subjects versus skills. And therefore, what needs to happen is that our system needs to make these strides beyond the pedagogical wisdom of the colonial epoch, which I've made the point in every single forum that I've gone to, where we focus really squarely on rote learning, on memorization, and the like, when that is really not what is required anymore. And even more than that, that there must be a very central focus on really what the future of work looks like, and mapping the skills and mapping the educational criteria with what that is. And of course, and Antonio would have made the point earlier about the languages. And of course, that has been a point that has been made several places and times, that somebody within this current dispensation needs to be able to know a foreign language, needs to be able to understand it, because really the idea of a global citizen is that you must be able to ensure that you know more than one. And even more than that, education needs to come from the deductive reasoning, and that one must be able to look around them and solve some of the very basic issues within our society. And if it is that the education system cannot seek to do so, then really we're running into major issues in that regard. And for me, similar to the point made in the chat, it really must be that focus on diversity of talent, yeah, as opposed to a very individual conception of what education and the future of work looks like. Because as it currently stands, you have this mismatch. You have a very great mismatch between what is being taught and what the labor force requires. And to that extent, we are setting up students of failure, because really we're churning out a bunch of students every single term that are sort of doing the very same thing, as opposed to maximizing the talent and skills in a number of ways to be able to maximize that level of talent and really what the labor force requires. Sometimes I'm daunted, but I'm cognizant that the EDMU and the others are making this point in the spaces that they need to, saying in very pointed way and in a very sharp and focused way that, listen, we have to increase what it is that the digital revolution requires, and more so even in this pandemic age, is not necessarily a replication of a physical space, but what we must be able to do is use the tools of the digital revolution, and even more than that, for Caribbean students particularly, ensure that we understand learning and education from a Caribbean perspective.
Right.
I've made the point that the structure of our timetable continues to be problematic. We understand the fatigue after lunchtime when we put history, but we still continue to do it. Yeah, and what happens is that everybody falls asleep in the class and nobody learns about TUSE and learns about the others within the region. These are things that we need to have real conversations about. Understanding the ideal, or rather understanding the normal Caribbean child, must be factored into our education planning. And I love what the African continent has been able to do in reshaping education. We need to be able to tackle education the same way Cuba would have tackled illiteracy. We need to be sharp and focused.
So right, you raised a bits of points there, and all quality points. And again, you have supporting comments in the chat, such as, yes, to maximize the education system and the talents, and we need to teach students to be steward of their talents and skills. Prudence, yes, indeed. We need to take a deeper, more critical look at what education means to us and how we leverage this understanding in getting to where we need to be. However, Antonia, we have a question for you from Ms. George to speak about how affordable higher education is in the French territories. Would you mind commenting on that, please?
Yes, I don't want to give a price, but what I can say is that it's way cheaper. It's way cheaper than the cost, the fees at the UWI universities. It's way cheaper. And what we do is that we actually have a unique price for students, for youth of the OECS region, because now that we understand that we are one and we have to work towards, the education for all, we have to work towards everything. We have to work towards that for everybody to be successful.
Right. So, okay, you're going to fees? You're able to quote any fees right now.
Excuse me, Mark. You were breaking down. I don't know what's wrong with the.
I'll just ask if you
can you repeat, please?
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. I was asking if you were able to break down anything in terms of. Sorry, yeah, in terms of fees.
I did not. As I said, I don't want to give. I don't want to give a number. I don't want to give a number on that. But I know that it's way cheaper, and affordable for students of the OECS, and as well, in response to Article 8.1, we have scholarships. We have institutions that are there to guide our students, and we also have social aids. accommodation as well. We have health accommodation, and healthcare is free for the students. So we really, as I said, want to help the low income students, the ones that are the most marginalized when it comes to learning and education.
Correct. And I'm hoping that the attendees of the session would really take the opportunities that can be still breaking up. Hello?
I am sorry, the connection is quite poor.
Yeah, you are.
Can you repeat your last question?
No, I was just saying that I hope the attendees take note of the opportunities to be had for using French as an opportunity for learning for higher education. We have had such a point-filled discussion. Everyone raised some quality points, and that just made the time go by so fast. So what I'm going to have to ask right now is just for each speaker to just take about 30 seconds and give a takeaway message to our attendees here today.
I just want to say that we have a lot of actions taking place right now. But the thing is, we can't do it alone. We can't promote this thing alone. So we need the help of stakeholders. We need the help of the institution. We need the help of the ministers. We're hoping to sign an educational cooperation convention between the ministers, the OECS, and the schools, and the authority of Martinique and Guadeloupe as well. I want you to bear in mind that the ministers.
Okay, Rahim.
Yeah, very quickly to sort of summarize everything that I've said. We need to move aggressively. We need to, one, ensure within the next some short-term goals that we possibly ensure that every student is bilingual and multilingual in some instances. We need to ensure that every student is schooled in the history of the Caribbean in a very pointed and sharp and focused way, so that it is that they're able to understand where they're going, because we understand that the past and the present and the future are inextricably linked. And we tend to be able to get to understanding something, we need to go to the origin of it. We need to be able to tackle what the future of work looks like within the context of what we're teaching students. And more so, we need to prepare students in a way that they're able to access and possibly live their hobbies. And to that extent, I think these are the things that we need to focus on from as early as early childhood education all the way to the tertiary level. We need to ensure that students are ready for the future of work. The students have the soft skills, they have the emotional intelligence, and the education system can't do it alone, but rather it's a whole of society approach.
All right, thank you, Rahim.
Yeah, so on closing, I read a quote recently that there's no industry that technology doesn't touch and won't revolutionize. And that speaks to a few of the comments that I saw in the chat regarding that learning is a continuous process. Personal development is a continuous process, and so is professional development. And we have to really prepare our students, as well as our teachers, for the inevitable, for what we don't know at the same time. And that means that learning is going to be a consistent process for possibly the rest of their lives. And that's the way that we need to approach it. And, thinking about, making sure that there's access for everyone with technology, it's to the point where there are free programs that, companies are having, that education tech platforms are putting together so that people from around the world can fill these voids, because technology is being integrated into every aspect of our lives. And most of our youth are already accustomed to technology, but maybe aren't the ones building it. And so we need to become the builders so that we can address some of the social, economical, and environmental issues within the OECS and our region on a whole, so that it's efficient for us and we retain that talent. I think that's, some of the key points that we need to look at when addressing education for the future. And, just finally speaking about the globally distributed workforce, and that apprenticeships are part of that process, that we really need to let our students know what exactly they're getting into before they, sign on the dotted line, and especially decide to go into that particular field for their higher education, especially if they have to pay and maybe don't have access to a scholarship.
All right. Yeah, as I said, we're out of time, but I just want to say thank you once more to Brittany, Raheem, Antonia, and the audience for your time and your attention. And this is where we end this session by the youth today on the future of education. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you to our youth panelists. We had a bit of break up in the connection there towards the end, but it in no way took away from the quality of the discussion. Now, what stood out to me was that a lot of the points that you raised today are reflected in the OECS Declaration on Education, and that's excellent. Equitable access, using technology as a tool and a resource, reshaping how subjects are taught, facilitating internships, and finally, prioritizing languages to increase opportunities. All very important. And I want to encourage you, in case you haven't as yet, to review the OECS Declaration on Education draft. I believe the link has been shared in the chat. So you can go in there and ensure that your vision is reflected in there, because this is the document that we are going to use to get the buy-in and the support from the policymakers to make this vision, make these ideas a reality. So certainly review the document, and I'm encouraging everyone that's participating today, if you haven't had a chance to review, we've had so much feedback between yesterday and today, but we want to hear from all of you. We want your impact. We want your input so that this document can be as inclusive as possible. So we are getting ready to wrap up for today, but the question still remains, where do we go from here? We invite Mrs. Cicera Simon, Program Director for the Education Unit at the OECS Commission, to provide some insight on the way forward. Mrs. Simon.
Thank you, Tahira. Good day, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Over the last 2 days, we reflected on our journey leading us to the OECS Declaration on Education. This declaration will guide the necessary transformation into a more responsive and resilient education system. Let us sum up the journey thus far. First, a series of stakeholder consultations through focus group meetings. A survey was undertaken in a 2-week period earlier this month. These consultations informed the development of a draft declaration, which has been widely circulated and presented here at this forum. And I must take this opportunity to thank all of you for your input thus far in really shaping this declaration. Following this 2-day forum, a series of national consultations will be undertaken within each member state during the month of January 2022 for further feedback on the declaration. So there are, we're creating other opportunities for persons to, really shape this in reflecting our realities in the OECS. Finally, thereafter, we will have a much improved draft, hopefully by February 2022. Our aim thereafter is to ensure that by the 7th Council meeting of Education Ministers in February of 2022, we are able to present this declaration there to the Council of Ministers for their official endorsement. So, how do we build on the principles of this declaration? It is one thing to have a declaration, but to ensure that this declaration remains alive, remains or becomes part of what we do. Within the EDMU at the OECS Commission, we have begun such discussions. However, colleagues, we invite you during this forum to please share with us your own ideas in the chat. Some of those we have already reflected on, and consideration is being given as we speak, as I report here, to the following. One, there is need for us to revise the regional education sector strategy. This strategy, as indicated yesterday in my presentation, was developed and endorsed before the COVID period. And with COVID, there is certainly a need for us to reflect again, revitalize, re-energize, rethink, and reshape some of what we are doing in education. The need for new sector strategies at the national level and plans. The need to ensure that this declaration will really inform all future projects and initiatives in education at both the national and regional level. And most importantly, it will be the basis for engagement with both our regional and international development partners, non-governmental organizations, and all other stakeholder groupings. Most important for us here at the Commission is to ensure that this declaration forms part of our monitoring, our evaluation, and reporting and learning in the OECS. So annually, we will be planning to report on how well are we progressing towards the implementation or adoption of such a declaration. So, colleagues, as indicated, we invite you to share your thoughts. Finally, let us take a sneak peek into the future of education in the OECS. Join us on this journey in creating this paradigm shift. Let us work towards this learning crescendo. Take a look, and thanks for your participation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the 2021 OECS Education Meeting Series. Thank you to all our participants, partners, and stakeholders for your invaluable contributions and unwavering support. As Mrs. Simon stated so poignantly in her presentation, the road ahead to the endorsement of the declaration is short, but there is much to be done. So we invite you, the citizens of the OECS, to join us on this journey. We look forward to your continued support as we seek to implement these decisions agreed to in the OECS Declaration on Education. To deliver the closeout and the vote of thanks, please join me in welcoming Mr. Gilroy Hall, Sports Coordinator here in St. Lucia.
Greetings to one and all. Ladies and gentlemen, and all our special guests, I must say thank you for joining us on this West, the Education Development Management Unit. Happy to know you run board and you never quit. Improving education in the OECS means year after year, we must reinvest. This pandemic means more challenges for us. Solutions must mutate faster than the virus. We gotta keep working. We gotta keep thinking. Dr. Hammond, Professor Emeritus, thanks for sharing your knowledge and your time with us. Miss Marika Baptist, you were impressive too. St. Vincent and the Grenadines must be proud of you. To everyone who contributed to this series, just letting you know that we are very pleased. Let the world know that we in the OECS provide our students with no less than the very best all the time. Leba boom bam boom, la da ba bim la ba boom bam boom. But the job is not finished. With our draft declaration now in place, we can't drop the ball, we have to keep up the pace. January 2022 National Consultation, February Regional Forum on Education. Then we revising the declaration also. Endorsement from ministers, we ready to go. The best education practice is our goal. Thank you so much for putting in your heart and soul. Thank you so very much. Skeba le bam bam boom, le de bam boom bam bam boom boom boom, le bam 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 bam. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Skalalam.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hall. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I think you certainly started the Christmas season for all of us on here. Once again, I am Tahira Carter, and from all of us at the OECS Commission, and especially the Education Management and Development Unit, we thank you and we look forward to your continued support as we seek to grow together as one community. We're going to leave you now with a highlight reel from yesterday's presentation. Thank you. Good day and welcome to our viewers from across the region and internationally. I am Tahira Carter, your host for the next 2 days of thought-provoking presentations and transformational discussions as we chart the future of education in the OECS.
Reshaping education is no longer a desire or a luxury. It is now a requirement for survival of the system and the salvation of the many who will be lost if we do not act now.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought into sharp focus the vulnerability, complexity, and fragility of our education system.
OECS member states and the Commission are charged with an important mandate, and that is to accelerate the development of education for the ultimate benefit of the people in the region.
I am a child. I love life. I am unique. I am special. I raise my hand to learn. Do you see me?
The union that has been formed in the OECS holds powerful potential for knowledge sharing, for joint research, for collaborative actions to advance education. Considering what OECS has already achieved with the relative strength and value of your currency, imagine what may be possible when you join forces around education. Social and emotional learning is not a distraction from academics. It's actually the pathway to academic success.
Strong relationships are central to the learning process. What the science of learning and development tells us is that we need to create learning environments which allow for strong long-term relationships for children to become attached to school and to the adults and other children in it.
So what kind of schools are needed now that we know so much more about learning? They'll look much less like this and much more like this. That is a collaborative, inquiry-oriented group work supported by the teacher who is the guide on the side to enable kids to make progress in their inquiries. Reprioritize. This is the time to see if something can be different. To reset the system, we have to take a loss. But we can recoup the loss if we actually get kids excited about education and create a more positive space for them to learn.
And so I think education is something that is transformative, it is something that is constant. And one of the greatest benefits is you end up seeing the fruits of your labor directly.
We are still preoccupied at the end of the day with the quantitative result of what our students do at school. You see a percentage mark for math, for English, and so on. But what does that percentage mark tells you about the child's ability
to learn? Anybody can regurgitate, read a book, regurgitate, and write an exam, but have you retained anything is a question. And I believe a lot of this comes from too much of a top-down approach. Are we talk about relationships with students and children, are we really engaging them and utilizing them as part of the discussion?
When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, it became clear that the best of OECS education was not good enough. OECS member states sprang into action, led by the Education Development Management Unit, designing the OECS COVID-19 Response and Recovery Strategy.
I will be presenting the first theme of the OECS Draft Declaration on Education, which is the OECS Vision of Education. This draft was developed through over 40 consultations and a widely circulated survey that solicited participation from all member states.
I present on the second theme entitled Harmonization of Education Policy. This theme encapsulates three key areas: digital transformation, Article 4, Article 5, data-driven curriculum and assessment reform, Article 6, expanded learning pathways,